If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
Welcome to Airchecks. Here is more of the Gene Shepherd Marathon on WOR in New York City. From December 19, 1963, Shepherd scats along with The Stars and Stripes Forever and the Okeh Laughing Record while doing a poor imitation of Clem McCarthy. News from Britain in Shep's Winston Churchill voice. Tattoos. The Sergeant and the Pearl-Handled Grooming Kit.
Thanks. Those idiots, the slobs out there. Oh boy, what a drag. Yeah, okay, Russ. Yeah, I suppose all the slobs were already out there listening, yeah. Boy, there's no more. What a collection of rat fakes. Yeah, hey, Russ. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh boy, enough of this slobby is a bunch of radio listeners, right, Russ? Yeah, okay, man. All right, we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Yeah, okay. Good evening, radio listeners and fans everywhere. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you again on this night. It's delightful to see you all out there, your bright and shiny faces. All of you waiting there on the edge of your seats for the truth. All of you waiting there on the edge of your seats for the truth. It's certainly delightful, ladies and gentlemen and friends of the radio world. Out there in the great, out beyond, out there in radio listener land, and we here in studio land salute you. We salute you and extend the hand in abject friendship to you. So we'll gather around, friends. It's good to see you. Hi, George. And now for my first selection, I'm going to play for the whole gang out there in Babylon who are enjoying a pajama party. And oh, what a pajama party they're having. Hi, gang. Hi. Boy, they sure named your town right, didn't they, Babylon? Yes, sir. And for the whole crowd up in Connecticut, up there in Gomorrah, we're going to do another little piece of music all together now. Let's go. Let's go, gang. Yes, it's a pleasure to see you tonight now, and I want you to all sing it out. Sing it right out. The Stars and Stripes Forever. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Texas Majorettes are marching across the field, their little pom-poms waving, and it's a delightful thing to see in this cold, brisk, ranking afternoon as the great football crowd has moved into the stadium and are now waiting for this fantastic game of the century to get underway. The band is now gathering behind the goalpost, and they're forming Oh, it's very exciting. Gee, I'm sorry we didn't... I'm sorry that I have to... It's such a letdown, you know. I'm sorry we couldn't bring you the rest of that football game. I understand that later on, after the network cut off, something happened that's just incredible. You'll be reading about it. If they dare to print the truth. If they've got the guts to come out and tell on the sport page what really happened that afternoon. What really happened when the spectators began streaming from the stands, taking their cue from the pickleball queen as she slowly but surely undulating sinuously to the sound of the tom-toms being played by that clean-limbed band out there. As she slowly but surely began to give them their cue, they filed from the stands. And the greatest football game in the history of Christendom began to take place. 74,000 people and the pickleball queen. One of the greatest sporting events ever seen in the history of American sporting annals. Good afternoon, racing fans. Thank God we're going to have a race this afternoon. They're being paraded now past the post, and all the bettors are beginning to make their choices, ladies and gentlemen. They're parading now past the post, and they're taking them down towards the quarter pole line, where they will be put into that starting stall for this, the greatest of all classic races. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as we are getting ready to go ahead with this great race, this classic race of all time, we pause now for one brief 60-second word from our sponsor, Instant Whoopee. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're out here at Shea Stadium. We're going to celebrate the opening of a brave new season with the New York Mets in their beautiful new stadium. We can see down there in the dugout the first Mets are beginning to slowly come out of the dressing room, their tails dragging behind them. You want to hear a little more of that? What's going to happen next season? You don't want to hear anymore. Well, that's probably just as well. Keep your dreams. Keep them all there. Woo-hoo. I don't know whether I ought to tell some jokes tonight or what. Would you like me to do my famous tap dance? Or do you want me to tell you my famous, Yeah, I think I may do that. Do you want to hear a little more about that? Oh, you want to hear about... all right, ladies and gentlemen. All right, bring it up there. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are privileged to witness one of the greatest hockey games in the history of the ice rink arena. Yes, this is a thrilling sport, ladies and gentlemen. And those of you who have never seen ice hockey, you have never seen real sport, real mayhem, real action, every minute, every second of the game. And now the Red Wings are skating out of the ice, and the Chicago Blackhawks are coming out on the ice. We can see them coming out with the left hand. The goalie is carrying a large club, and it looks like the forwards are now mixing it up. Here comes the defenseman of the Red Wings in. My God, this is a game. There goes one down, there's another one. Here comes, you can hear in the background the sound of the sirens coming closer and closer. There are over 400 spectators now mixing it up back of the press box. I'll be back in just a minute while I get this slob behind me right in the mouth. I'll be back in just 60 seconds. All right, you wise guys. You don't want to hear any more impressions of the American sporting scene, do you? Yes, well, I figure we'll all have a lot to answer for. And one of the things I'll have to answer for is a dismal quarter season spent doing the play-by-play of an improbable ball team. You won't believe it. Of an improbable ball team named the Toledo Mud Hens. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out here at Wakefield, where the Toledo Mud Hens are taking on the rough, tough, rock'em sock'em 9 from Fort Wayne. The smoke is swirling in from the stockyard, back of the Erie track. The temperature now stands at 142 degrees. The visibility is 7 feet. And it's going to be an exciting, tough ball game. There's a big crowd out here tonight, folks. There are over 722 fans charging. Oh, there we go.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
Geico makes it easy to get affordable renter's insurance in as little as 90 seconds. That way, you have more energy for harder things, like the laundry. Why is it so difficult to fold clothes? They just end up wrinkly anyway, or on the floor in a pile that just sits there, taunting you. But with renter's insurance through Geico, at least you know that those clothes and the other things you love are covered. Get more with Geico.
You don't want to hear that, do you? Do you want to hear me? Do you want to hear? All right, one more. We'll bring up here we go. Come on, let's go all together. All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here at the Indianapolis Speedway, beginning the 723rd consecutive running of the great 500-mile classic. There are 33 beautifully tuned machines, all lined up down there in 11 rows, three each, ready for the takeoff. There goes the lead pace car beginning to take off down the track, and it looks like in just a few moments, the 792nd running of the great 500-mile classic from Indianapolis Speedway in Indianapolis, Indiana. One of the great classics of American sporting. There goes the lead car. Ladies and gentlemen, three cars have just crashed with the slam. There are over 2,500 spectators. One over, killed. Look at that one. Oh, boy, what a race. Ladies and gentlemen, there have been 720 deaths already, and we've just gone into the third. Coming into the third. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. What a race. All right, gang. I don't know what's the matter. It must be because it's Friday. Whew, speaking of trouble, this is WOR AM and FM New York. I feel like a tap dancer on the Ed Sullivan Show. Whew, after 45 ovations. Reprisals. Is that what they do to a tap dancer? It isn't exactly what they should do to him. And we're here. Let's see. We better get rid of a commercial here because we've got serious things to do here instead of... Speaking of sporting events, I really shouldn't bring this up at this time, but run a sporting event here in WOR at 3 o'clock. WOR invites you on Sunday to hear the 12th broadcast of the season by the New York Philharmonic. Under Amerigo Marino, one of the two musicians selected to conduct the orchestra under the American Conductors Project. Amerigo Marino under the American Conductors Project. So, we'll be here. Hey, George, you know, sometimes I feel like my knee is getting the best of me. Oh, that's Sunday. They're going to play Rossini Sonata No. 3 in C major, Hindemuth Symphonia Serena, and Beethoven's Violin Concerto in D major. And the special guest star will be Freddie Martin. And, it's very good. He plays the timpani, the piano, and a lot of things. Sings. And we'll be here until the important stuff happens. Speaking of the important stuff and things of that nature, here we have just a few minutes. And we better get with it. We have with us tonight the pottery of all nations. And if you are getting desperate, Dad, and desperate in the way of gift things, and there are many of us who are, I would like to highly recommend the visit to Pottery of All Nations. It is, Pottery of All Nations is literally the name, and that's what it means. Tremendous collection of imported stuff from all over the world. A lot of imported stuff that, well, we just don't even talk about on the radio, but they've got a lot of wonderful things down there. And this is on Sheridan Square. And they're open Saturday, and they'll be open very late Saturday. So if you are coming to New York to make the Christmas shopping scene, be sure to visit the Pottery of All Nations. Beautiful stuff, and it's from all over the world at prices that you can't believe. This is Sheridan Square. There's one at 64th and Lexington on the Upper East Side, and one in Jersey at Route 4 in Paramus. And a lot of your problems will be taken care of there, as well as a lot of your cash, which can be problems. All right, okay. I'm not going any further. I will continue here, don't worry. Any sport fans out there want to hear my famous impressions of other American sporting events? All right, how about this one? All right, here, let's go again. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here at Madison Square Garden, where two of the greatest professional basketball teams in the country are now squaring off for the second half of their epic ball game to determine the professional championship of the professional basketball world. The score now stands at 722 to 698, and these two ball teams are fighting tooth and nail all the way down to the wire. There isn't a ball player on this team. Here they come out there. The Boston Celtics are knocking out. There's not a ball player on this team that is less than 23 feet high. The New York Rangers, fielding a hockey team last season, have now decided to give that game up and go into basketball. They have a ball team that averages over 27 feet in height. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the sport of good, clean American boys. Every one of them little boys and girls just like the kids you... Yes, indeed. You want to hear more about that? I can do some. You want to hear some more of those? I do a fantastic impression of professional football, in case you're interested in that one. You want to hear that one? All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here at Fairfield, better known as Wrigley Field in Chicago, where the Chicago Bears, the Western Division champions of the National Football League, take on the New York Giants in their epic battle. The New York Giants, led by Y.A. Tittle, known for his beautiful passing and his magnificent skill in handling a ball club, which from time to time has been difficult to handle. Y.A. Tittle is lined up down there now in his famous C-formation crouch. The Chicago Bears, trained as a defensive ball team, are here today to show why they won the Western Division Championship, allowing an average of less than 7 points per game per opponent. Yes, this is a rock'em sock'em tough ball game. Ladies and gentlemen, today already there have been over 4 fractured skulls in the first half. The game is progressing nicely. The fans are rioting nicely. In fact, right out there in left field over the scoreboard now, we can see the nightsticks of the finest of Chicago being swung with that bird that the Chicago cops are famous for. The bettors are lined up now, and we can hear the chant and the cry of the bookies out there in the upper deck, all the way here into the press box. So this is the American sporting scene at its best. Now they're lining up for the kickoff to begin the second half. There is Don Cornell is lining up. There he comes. He's screaming up to the red line. Boom! There goes the kick, ladies and gentlemen, and they're charging down. Oh my God! Look at that! This is fantastic! What a play! What a play! And now they're taking Del Chopper out of the game of Broken Hulk and American. More of the exciting sporting life here. What's the matter? That's this kind of stuff makes you sweat just to think. You know, speaking of the sporting life, this is Friday night. You can tell it, can't you? Hello, Test. Hello. You still out there? Friends of the radio audience? Fellow sufferers? George. Let's see. Well, the sporting scene, of course, gets more interesting wherever you go. And all over the world, sport takes a different slant, so to speak. It gets different every place you go. For example, we have here a little thing that might be of interest to you. Radio Tokyo brings you a special radio broadcast from Reuters. Employees at City Hall in Wakayama have been warned under threat of dismissal to keep their pants on during working hours. We repeat, employees at City Hall in Wakayama are now hereby warned from government warning under threat of dismissal, keep pants on during working hours. The employees in City Hall there have also been banned from slipping out for coffee and from playing mahjong during office hours. Mayor Zonichi Takaganai issued 10 articles of discipline calling for proper attire, punctuality as befitting all good Japanese bureaucrats, no coffee or tea breaks, no mahjong, and name tags for all employees except the mayor and high officials. Once again, democracy marches on in Japan. I kind of like the idea. You know, I think that's going a little too far, this business of no pants. Not allowing the guys to, you know, I mean, that's... So obviously sport takes a different attack in these other countries. And to kind of show you that for those of you who are wondering how the world is doing out there, since it is very difficult to get actual news of the world. I mean, you get a lot of stuff that politicians are saying and various guys are making speeches about, but what's happening? I mean, how are things going? Really, seriously, friends, neighbors, how are things going? Let's look across the sea, hands across the sea, to the land of Richard the Lion-Hearted, the land of Winston Churchill, and the land of some of the worst movies you ever saw. Let's reach hands across the sea now, and once again, we visit... The British Broadcasting Corporation, in conjunction with the Associated Press, brings you once again, for the Imperial Majesty and for those colonials and those British subjects overseas, a salute to England and English attitudes and Englishmen everywhere. We shall fight them from the hedgerows. We'll fight them from the vineyards. We'll fight them with blood, sweat, and tears. There'll always be an English, thank God. Tonight, it's religious news from here, there, and everywhere, throughout the length and breadth of this wonderful little island, Portsmouth, England. The very Reverend E.N. Portergoff, Provost of Portsmouth Anglican Cathedral, said today he was very proud of his church's Christmas mural, which features human embryos, half-naked girls, and wrestling posters. Yes, the Reverend E.N. Portergoff, Provost of Portsmouth Anglican Cathedral, said, "This mural is meant to make people think." And indeed it will, Reverend. And now we move to Little Rumford, England. Little Rumford by the sea. Tattoo artist Victor Shipton. For those of you who believe that the British youth are beginning to go the way of those terrible American youths, we would like to give you one little word of encouragement tonight. Tattoo artist Victor Shipton said today teenagers are lining up outside his shop to get special Christmas tattoos. There is a rush for religious subjects just now, Shipton said. The crucifixion is probably the most popular. One of his customers, Brian Hargraves, 16, and an Englishman to the core, said he got his Christmas tattoo, and we quote young Brian tonight, "to help me think about religion more often." And so the British Broadcasting Corporation, in its third programming services, salutes young Brian Hargraves as a true religious Briton. And by George, young Brian, we salute thee as an Englishman. And so tonight, the British Broadcasting Corporation concludes its special salute to England and Englishmen, wherever they might be. For the interesting program of Lady Mendel Hargrave, who reports with her description of runic ruins in the Upper Land's End district. All right. Do you know that my hand is extended to that kid. That guy with the tattoo. Should I really tell you tonight about my experience with the tattoo artist and about the time I made the big plunge, or came so close to making the big plunge that even now, believe me, Ed, my ears sweat when I think about it. Oh, boy. You know, I'll tell you, have any of you ever out there, and this is something probably most women will never quite understand, but have any of you out there ever had the vague, little sneaking, vague desire to get something printed on your epidermis? Huh? Never? Come on, don't give me that jazz. What are you talking about? That is not true. No, nothing so clear that you can put it down and say, yes, I remember one Wednesday in the fall of 1957, I decided, yes, perhaps it would be nice to have an anchor on the back of my head. No, I'm not discussing that specific moment. Have you ever had the vague... I wonder, do women understand this? They do. Oh, come on, that's not true. I can't believe that women understand the... Very few women, as far as I know, ever get tattooed. Very few. And yet a lot of men get tattooed, and it's very difficult to explain it to women. I'll tell you it is. And it's, well, it doesn't stop there. It's difficult to explain it to yourself after you've done it. And oh no, I'm not talking about the little thing where you write your boyfriend's name on your wrist or that kind of thing. I'm talking about a magnificent smoke-breathing, fire-shooting out of the eyeballs dragon that's 2.5 feet long and extends from your second thumb knuckle all the way up to your shoulder blade, you know, with the tail reaching down somewhere near your waist. I mean, that kind of a thing. Well, no, that's a very, very peculiar thing, and one of those things which I rarely hear discussed in polite American society, and yet there is no question about it, but the urge exists. There was a guy who had a candy store near the Harding School where I once festered, who's had the greatest collection of cockamammies, the greatest collection of these little things, you know, that you put in the water, Ed, and you put on the back of your hand, and then you take it off, and you got the Grand Canyon there, you know, in 3 terrible colors. It always looks like a bird at high altitude did something on you. But nevertheless, the thing is fascinating, and this guy is the only guy I ever knew, seriously, the only guy I ever knew who sold under-the-counter transfers. He had transfers like you wouldn't believe exist, I'll tell you. And the kids were buying them, you know, and they were putting them in places where Mama wouldn't see. You know, like under their kneecap, you know, behind, and he had these wild things. And once in a while, a kid would be sitting in school, and he would pull up his knickers and show the chick across the aisle what he had on his knee, which, well, it caused a lot of excitement. I remember it during slow periods when Miss Shields was reading little Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy, and Joss Way would be sitting in the back there, and all of a sudden up would come the knickers. And Esther Jane Alberry is sitting across the aisle, and all of a sudden there would be this picture, this wild scene, and she would look, and then there would be the, you know, and Miss Shields would say, all right, pass the note, give me the note. Well, Joshua wasn't sending any notes. But I'll never forget the day that Miss Shields saw him. I shouldn't tell you that it was Joshua. Guess who it was? Miss Shields saw this culprit whipping up the elastic band on his corduroy knickers to show a rather interesting scenic description of well, it was an anatomical study is what it was, and he was showing this to a girl named Eileen Akers. When Miss Shields saw this strange, suspicious movement, says, "Come on up here." She said, "What have you got on your pants?" And with that, she looked, and that was the end of the scene. 3 hours later, Miss Shields was down at the candy store, and I understand that there was a great change of stock there. Oh, yeah, but the urge and the desire to have a tattoo put on your epidermis is a very strong thing. I'll never forget the time, though, that I came very close to having this awful thing done to me. And how it happened, maybe this might be a lesson to any of you who might be entertaining such thoughts. This is an educational broadcast, as you know, and we might not educate you in the Vietnamese problem, but there are other things closer to home. And this is exactly what happened. One night, this was in the Army. Most of these things happen when guys are in a hothouse or a wild or strange situation where there's no way at all to gain any kind of identity. You know what I mean by that? If you're in the Army, everybody's got that same suit on, and everybody's got the same look in the eye, and everybody's eating the same rotten French toast, and everybody's having the same fight and the same argument, and they're mad at the same people, and the blisters are in the same place on everybody, and so you walk around and you kind of cast around somehow, nuttily, insanely, for something that says, "This is me," even if the thing you're saying is, "This is me and I'm rottener than anybody." You know, you just look for something. Just something terrible. I remember one time I ran into a staff sergeant. Funny thing, to the lengths the guys will go to sort of put a tag on themselves, to identify themselves from the rest of the herd. I remember a staff sergeant one time that I ran into in Fort Dix, as a matter of fact. And this staff sergeant had the bunk above me. And every night, this staff sergeant, who'd been in the Army like 3 years, and, you know, he really did. This guy looked like a canteen. He was just completely GI'd and completely, yes, he was completely indoctrinated, and he looked very sharp, very, very, very official, you know. Every night this guy would come in, and it would be about 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and he would very carefully take down his barracks bag, which was hung at the end of the sack. And it was a double bunk, and he would untie this thing and bring it down, and he would open the bag. And I would be sitting on the bottom bunk, festering away there, doing whatever it is you do, picking your toes or something, and I'm sitting there just looking off into the middle distance, and the sergeant would open up the top of his barracks bag. And then he would reach in and take out a case. Very carefully take this case out. He would open the case up, and believe it or not, it was a leatherette case that was lined with red velvet. And in the case, there was a collection of these mother-of-pearl brushes, mother-of-pearl fingernail files, mother-of-pearl handled fingernail clippers. There was a mother-of-pearl manicure buffer. The whole scene, you know, and it's mother-of-pearl. This is the kind of jazz that you get for Christmas, you know, in Circleville, Ohio, from the rector of the Presbyterian Church. And this guy would take this stuff up very carefully, and he would put it all out on his bunk, and he would proceed to manicure his nails with this mother-of-pearl thing. The guy was 9 feet tall. He had stubble all the way down to his ankles, and he would look around defying anybody to make a smart crack. Just go, he's buffing the nails with his mother-of-pearl nail buffer. Well, of course, I'm watching this scene, and I'm sitting there picking my toes, looking out into the middle distance, and I never once really said anything about it, but it made a great impression on my head. You know, it was right there. This guy kept doing this. Every night he would take out the mother-of-pearl brush, and he would brush his hair. Then he would take out his mother-of-pearl buffer, and he would buff the things. Then he would take out his mother-of-pearl picker, and he would pick at his fingernails. Then he would clip them. And then he would do all of this stuff with a mother-of-pearl comb, one of those long combs, you know, those mother-of-pearl with the little silver top on it. Oh, it was the most rococo thing you ever saw. It looked ridiculous in the barracks. And he's doing all this stuff, going away there. This continued for, say, maybe 4 weeks while I knew this guy. He never said anything other than that. He would snap it shut, clunk, put it back in the bag, tie it up. He would hang it up. He would go back up to the top of his bunk. He'd squeak down. He'd lay there. He'd nothing wearing his shorts, and that's all. He'd lay down, and you hear squeak, 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 and he would pick up his copy of Spicy Detective and start reading. And that would be the end of it. Never say anything to anybody. He was the most GI-looking cat, though, that I ever seen in my life. And then one Wednesday night, he's not there. Just absolutely not there. I figure he's down at the service club, you know. That's it. I don't think anything about it. Thursday dawns bright and early. I get up, I run around, I squirt water on me and do all the stuff you do, you know, in the morning, yell and holler, get mad again all over again like I've been getting mad for the last 3 years. I get mad. No, I don't want to do it. Inside I say this, but I'm out doing it. I'm picking the chickens and scrapping and scraping and digging, sweating and peeling, doing all the stuff. And I come back to the barracks after another miserable day spent defiling the human psyche. And I come tromping in, and there's his bag still hanging there, and his bunk is clean, nice, hasn't even been slept in. So, you know, came in, went out, that's all. This continued for maybe 2 days. And Friday afternoon, I'm getting ready to cut out of that place. Boy, I'm going to get out of slam tonight good. You know, I got the pass, I'm getting all ready, and all of a sudden the guy comes down from headquarters. He says, hey, where's Sergeant Watanabe? You seen him around? I'd say, no, what? You know, what? He says, well, nothing. And he goes out, and the next Monday I am back from civilization, and I'm exhausted, broke, sweating, mad, my uniform's torn, I got mud all over me, and I got a bump on my head, you know, after the weekend, and I'm mad. It's Monday morning, my head is thumping, and my eyeballs are red, and the whistles are blowing, and I'm getting ready to go out, and I'm running through the barracks, and in comes this same guy. He says, hey, come here, Mac. And I said, what do you want? You know, he's a tech sergeant. What do you want? He says, when's the last time you seen Watanabe? I don't know. What do you mean, Watanabe? I don't know nothing about it. I don't know nothing. He says, when's the last time you seen that crumb? I said, well, how'd you put it that way? I guess last week, Wednesday or something. Wednesday? He wasn't in? You never saw him? I said, no. Will you cut out covering up, Private? I said, what do you mean covering up? I don't know the guy. What are you talking about? Even talk to him. Well, 10 minutes later, I'm down at HQ. And there's about 5 guys around yelling at me, where's this guy? Saying, I don't know where this guy is. What do you mean? I don't talk to staff sergeants. What? And it turns out that it seems that old Watanabe one night had just decided he'd had it. And he took off for Nome or someplace, and that was it. leaving his mother-of-pearl brushes. And they figured somehow I was a Confederate, that I had gotten him over the wall or under the guard or something. You see, and I didn't know anything about it. So about 3 days after the Inquisition, they've been hitting me on the head with rubber hoses and stuff. In they came. In comes the sergeant. And the sergeant is taking the guy's bag down, see, and he opens up the bag to find out if he can find some kind of an address of a chick or something in there. And he reaches in, and he's pulling the stuff out, and first of all, there's a bottle of scotch. You know, he pulls that out. He says, that's crumb. He pulls the scotch out. Of course, he sticks it for evidence. He's taking it. So, yeah. So he takes the scotch. He says, what's this? He opens this thing up, and there are the mother-of-pearl things. You know, there's a mother-of-pearl brush, a mother-of-pearl knuckle duster. There's a mother-of-pearl thing that you scrape out your ears with. It's all there, see? And he looks at this thing, and he says, what in the devil? He says, hey, you Mac, meaning me. See, I'm trying to hide behind the foot lockers and everything. Hey, you Mac, come here. I said, what do you mean? He says, what is this? I said, what do you mean, what is this? It's not mine. It's not mine. It's not mine. There's my bag over there. The bee bag's over there. He said, what is this? I said, what do you mean, what is this? He said, what is this thing here? And he's got the knuckle duster with the little leather thing, you know, that you buff your hands. I says, I think it's a knuckle duster or something you buff your nails with. Buff your nails! Oh, come on, will you? He says, what? Did Watanabe use this? And I says, yeah, I guess so. He used to. Did you see him using this? I says, yeah, he used what? What did he do with it? I said, well, he sat on his bunk and he would go like this, you know, and I said, come here, I'll show you. I'm blushing. He said, oh, yeah, well, okay, that explains it. And he grabs the thing, clunk, he goes like this. He says, boy, wait till the major sees this. And he goes clumping out in the general direction of headquarters. And I have no idea what fantastic evidence he had uncovered. All I know is one day his barracks bag disappeared. They rolled up his mattress. They took his blankets and his sheets, and that was the last I ever heard of Watanabe. And every day I would see this guy. I would walk past regimental headquarters. I would see this sergeant, and he would look out at me as if I was some kind of a Confederate, some kind of a guy that buffed his knuckles with a mother-of-pearl thing. Regimental headquarters. And to this day now, I can't look in these crummy shops along 6th Avenue, you know, where it says fantastic Christmas gift. Peroxylin, mother-of-pearl imitation, beautiful boudoir set containing one brush, one knuckle duster, one thing to clip the hairs in your nose, one thing to grub out the beetles out of your ears, one thing to comb your hair with, comes in simulated leather case with simulated red velvet lining. A beautiful Christmas gift for someone who is really special. All right, get it out there, gang. So you got the scene, see? Well, I'm festering in this place for a while, and this place it doesn't exist anymore. The place I was festering in, though. I wonder if any of you were ever at a place. Oh boy, was it terrible at one point. A place called Camp Wood. Does it still exist? Camp Wood, right outside of Monmouth. I'll tell you what Camp Wood was in those days. Camp Wood was the place. It was like a human midden heap. It really was. It was like a human junkyard. All the guys who were in Monmouth, Monmouth was this big camp. You know where it is over here by Red Bank. That's a big thing, you know. We used to walk past Monmouth like poor bums must walk past the Waldorf. We would look in at Monmouth like it was incredible. You know, they had roofs and stuff. And you know, they had roads and everything else, and people wore shoes and stuff. And it didn't rain there or something. We were at Camp Wood. Camp Wood was the place where all the guys that were thrown away were thrown. You know, yeah, well, it was terrible. Mud up to your neck, you know. Mud there, you know, and you're slogging along and people yelling and screaming at each other. Trucks stuck in the middle of the afternoon right out in front of your house, this rotten tent. And, oh, boy. And it was always 150 degrees below zero there. Did you ever hear of Camp Wood? Well, so this began to plunge us into a profound sense of apathy, whatnot, and there was a kind of desperation. So one fantastically brittle, cold, disappointing, rotten night, Gasser and me and a guy named Birnbaum are in the bus on our way to Long Branch. Yes, we're going to get out of here and we're going to make the Long Branch scene. And we're sitting there. We each have about $3.20 in our pocket, and we have 17 pounds of desperation. We have 45 pounds of irritation and about 95 pure gold ounces of complete apathy. And we're sitting in the bus in the back, and there's this little bus, a little red bus. I don't know whether they still have them, but this little red bus with a brown top, which it was a wind-up bus. It was the first bus I ever saw that didn't have a gas motor and that they wound it up from the back. And it's going, and we're putting along there, and the wind is coming through, and it's terrible. And Gasser is sitting next to me, and Birnbaum is on the other side. Gasser says, you want to make the Red Bank USO? Or do you want to go to the Asbury Park USO and break another ping pong paddle? Or how about making Long Branch? I don't know. You know, what do you got choice? You got a choice of a ping pong table in Long Branch, a choice of a ping pong table in Red Bank, and a choice of a ping pong table in Little Silver. So here you're sitting there, you know, I don't know, that's Long Branch. All right, Long Branch. So we're going to Long Branch. Well, we arrive at Long Branch, and we are walking around Long Branch, and it is maybe, it's like on a Wednesday, in the middle of the week. Hardly anybody's out of the camp. Hardly anybody's alive. And Jersey is just laying there. You know how the Garden State just lays there in the middle of winter, you know, just laying there. And we're walking around Long Branch. Well, now, Long Branch is an interesting place. During the winter, Long Branch has all the outward aspects of one of the more interesting funerals that I've ever attended. It's a very strange place. I mean, there is a note of genuine mourning in the air. I don't understand what it is. I don't know what they're mourning. Maybe the ocean or something. And so we're walking around. There is a little boardwalk, if I remember rightly, there. And there's a boardwalk there, and there's a couple of places where you can get spaghetti. And so we're just sort of scrounging around, and there is a sign. And the sign said, "Soldiers Welcome." Well, we always, you know, that was a funny thing. We always sort of woke up, "Soldiers Welcome." And there was a little light in there, and there was a kind of warmth in there, and we saw about 3 or 4 corporals sitting in there. And it was Professor Zavarsky, tattooing artist, now in session. Well, Gasser walks past, and in the window of Professor Zavarsky's little establishment there, which looked like one of these places where they make keys here in town, he had a collection of various objets d'art which you could have hem-stitched on your epidermis at a reasonable price. And time payments could be arranged if you wanted a really extensive mural done for demonstration and for exhibition purposes. Well, we're looking in the window there, and Gasser says, "You know," with that, Birnbaum says, "I know, Gasser." And I at the end said, "Yeah." I wasn't quite. So Gasser says, look at the chick there with the green tail. It's the one there that says Marie under it. It says you can get any name you want. I knew a chick once. And I'm envisioning this chick he knew somewhere out, some places. Boy, what a picture, I'm thinking about that. With the scales. And he says, she reminds me. Well, 5 minutes later, believe it or not, we are sitting in this place, and it is hotter than the hinges of hell. We're sitting in this place, and every so often I could hear coming from behind the screen. They had this little red screen there. You could hear this guy, ow, hey, for crying out loud, watch it. Just one moment there. This is a very difficult thing. I must get the tail right now. Watch.
But right now, we're going Christmas shopping with Gene Shepard. Don't know how we've avoided playing this show. I've had it forever. December 23rd, 1963. Little Jeannie is going shopping at the Five and Dime to buy Mom something very, very special. A perfume atomizer. From December 23rd, 1963. Let's pick up on Gene Shepard here. After a little more Gary Glitter.
wonderful world of Gene Shepard. That's the worst thing you can say to a hippie. Right out loud, it's the rotten world of Shepard. That's the only thing that counts in this world. How am I going to make it? I mean, if everyone thinks I've got a wonderful world, you're trying to kill me professionally? The wonderful world of Lenny Bruce, I didn't murder him. Ruin him, he'd be dead. What are you trying to do, Cal? Who are you working for, Mort Saul, you bum? Right out loud. A retired radio Santa Claus, I every year about this same time, Walt, I get the old urge of the retired radio Santa Claus to get that gurgly sound in your voice, you know, like it's a funny business. But you know, speaking of isn't it a great night out? And it really is great out. I'll tell you, you hear all these guys yelling about the weather all day long on the radio. We got about 10 of them on the station here talking about the weather incessantly on the air. And you never once hear a guy say, wow, what a gas. And now the news, you know? I mean, it's so impersonal as to be ridiculous. The other night, when it was just beginning to snow, I dialed weather, you know, on the telephone thing, and there was this great Brooklyn weather girl. I'll tell you, I enjoyed her a lot more than any weather girls you ever hear on television. The Central Park temperature is now 70, you know, that kind of thing. And they've got this beautiful sound that you'll never hear anywhere. So have you ever heard the Chicago weather girl? Oh, sure, you know, they've got these weather girls. You know, the telephone company has this thing, and wherever you go, in whatever city it is, you dial this number, whatever number they have. It's always, I think it may be the same number across the country. Well, I know what it is here, yeah. But you generally get a pure distillate of the local culture when you dial those girls, because nothing makes a telephone number, because they apparently just pick them at random. I don't know. Do they audition these girls? Do they cover various sections of Manhattan and Queens and the Bronx? One day they have a lady from the Bronx, so she sounds a little different from the Brooklyn gal, you know. And then, you know, to give fair play, to give it fair cross-section. But, oh, boy, was there a dilly of a Brooklyn, a pure Brooklyn. She sounded like these, you know, these women that used to do all kinds of Brooklyn accents on the radio when they had... you remember shows with Milton Berle. There was always somebody saying, what are you talking about? You know, that kind of thing. Well, this lady the other night says, the Central Park temperature is 29 degrees. The barometer is rising, and it's fantastic. You know, I listened to that. It was one of the greatest comedy routines I've heard in years, and all she was doing was the weather. And she had that slightly querulous sound in her voice that Arthur Kober, isn't it Arthur Kober, the guy that does used to do the great pieces in New York, still does once in a while. Bella, you remember Bella? It sounds, you always have a feeling that that the lady who's doing these things is out of an Arthur Kober story. That's where she works. The temperature is slightly irritated, and you drop dead, you know, that kind of thing. Thank you. And now the weather. It goes click. The 1 a.m. Central Park temperature reading, 1 a.m. Central Park temperature reading, 1 a.m. She gets hung up a little bit once in a while when the tape gets balled up. Did you ever call weather and get a busy signal? Sure. I have done that whenever we went in town. Of course, the New Yorkers panic quickly. And they want to make sure that when they look out of the window, that, you know, when it's raining or snowing or the temperature is like 20, they want to make sure it's official. So they call up to find out if it's really snowing, you know, or really raining. Nobody believes the senses here in town. But It is a great night, I'll tell you. I always go out looking around at the Christmas world just before Christmas, and to me, there is no place that makes Christmas better, that makes the scene more completely than the dime stores. Maybe this goes back to my lower nothing class youthhood, in which whenever the Christmas shopping started, the kid goes out to Christmas shop, he immediately goes to the dime store. Where else? You don't go to Bonwit Teller when you're on a 40-cent budget for the entire thing. That covers 6 people. Well, so I would immediately go to the dime store, Woolworth. You see, we had 2 or 3 big dime stores in town that competed. There was Woolworth, there was Kresge's, which was a dime store too, and let's see, there was Kresge's, Woolworth, and what was the other one? There was another one. Not J.C. Penney. No, there was another dime store that was around. You don't see that one anymore. But Kresge's and Woolworth were my big areas of dealing. And I had my eye on a thing one time. I remember buying... Do you remember any stuff you ever bought for your parents when you were a kid? It's embarrassing now when you think about it. But I'll tell you what I did one Christmas. And I didn't intend to tell this story, but I might as well. But I was figuring, you see, for about a month or so before Christmas, I was always going into the dime store and looking the scene over, figuring out what would make it and what I could make and what would really make the house complete. It would really somehow it would make my mother's life sing, that sort of thing. So I saw this perfume atomizer. It was a silver one. It was glass, but it had silver inside of it. You see, it was vaguely frosted on the outside. And now that I think back on it, it must have been one of the worst-looking things that Woolworth ever handled. It had a rubber bulb on it that was sort of jonquil yellow, and it squeaked when you squeezed it, which I thought it showed that it was good. It made like a little mouse, one of those rubber mice. When you squeeze it, it made a squeaky sound. Ow, ow. When you squeeze it, that shows it really has a lot of suction and a lot of power. It really blows a lot of perfume out. Well, I kept going past and looking at this thing. And this was maybe about 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas. And I had a debate a lot, because it was a tremendous investment. It was a full quarter. And, it was going all the way. It was a quarter. And they had other atomizers there for 15 cents. They had a couple of them for 20 cents. And I was looking at the high-priced line on the middle shelf there, the 25-cent atomizers, and they had some red ones, and they had a blue one. Let me tell you, that would make your eyeballs sweat just to look at it. It was so blue. I don't know where they got the blue, but even at that age, I could see that was a rotten color. But somehow the silver one with the yellow bulb, and it had a yellow hose on the side of it, and the top was imitation gold. Well, at the time, of course, I just called it gold. It had a gold top. And I kept looking at this thing. And finally, I decided, well, okay. And I'm in town with my brother, and, my mother and father are gone off. So then, no, look, we'll meet in front of Minus's. Now, you be there immediately. And don't get lost, don't get hung up, because we do not want to have to go scrubbing around through the dime store looking for you kids. Now, at exactly 8 o'clock, now you can see when the big hand is pointing, and now you be here at 8 o'clock in front of Minus's. Now, you hear? Okay. So we go off, we split, and Randall's got a full 30 cents to spend. Since I was older, I had something like 45. I was going all the way out, and I'm down there, and immediately I make a beeline for the counter where they sell the cosmetics and all the false eyelashes. You ought to see the Woolworth false eyelashes. They're great. I'll tell you that. Well, they've got them, So I'm looking around, and I have to make one last survey of the scene to make sure that is really what I want to get. So I go looking over the scene. I look back and forth, and finally, okay, I'm going to pop. So I go up to this lady that is in charge of the atomizer section there, and there's about 5 million people shopping in the dime store, of course. Hey, they were stacked up like cordwood. You can't even, you know what a mess it is trying to get waited on. Even when you're grown up, you can yell back. It's very hard, but a little kid, So it took me about 40 minutes to get this chick, to decide I really wanted to buy one of these things. And she says, okay, all right, here. And she takes it down and she wraps it all up and says, you want it wrapped? Yeah. You know, they gift wrap, believe it or not. And the dive store, I don't know. Do they still? I doubt whether they still do. They had a gift wrap department, so I go down and I get this thing gift wrapped, and boy, oh boy, it was fantastic. Absolutely incredible. I mean, I was really knocked out of my skull with this thing because, you know, it was the biggest gift I can ever remember buying my mother. You know, it's a big thing. So I take the thing all the way home. You know, we're sitting in the back seat of the Graham Page, and I got this thing stuck under my sheepskin coat where nobody can tell what I've got. Oh, no, it's a secret now. And, of course, my mother always says, did you do any shopping? Yeah, well, yeah. She says, well, what did you buy? And Randy is going, you know, he's going, and I'll shut up, it's a secret. Well, of course, it's a fantastic secret what I've got for everybody. I got this giant plastic lotto game for my kid brother, you know, which he cared for like a shot in the head. Lotto. I never knew a kid that cared a nickel for lotto, but they always get gifts of lotto sets. And so I got a lotto set for him, and I got from my father a shaving brush. It was the only shaving brush I knew that molted. This thing was, it had a yearly, it was a 12-cent shaving brush, and it went through an actual molting period. I want to tell you what happened the first time he stuck it in the hot water. Oh boy. But that's another point. But anyway, the whole big thing, of course, was the atomizer. That was the big scene that I was getting at. So I got this atomizer, and I could hardly wait. You know, you always want to show it to somebody. I got to show, hey, Mom, I bet you can't guess what I got. And she'd say, well, now, I thought it was supposed to be a surprise. I don't want to know. Well, yeah, that's right. That's a surprise. I bet you can't guess, though, boy. And she'd say, well, what did you get? A Fielder's mitt? Oh, come on, Ma, I don't want a Fielder's mitt. No, I bet you can't guess. Really, it's first of all, I'll tell you, it's little. It's a little package. It's very little. You'll probably think it's not much, but it's because it's so little, see? But you'll be surprised because it's fantastic. It's a very little package. And she'd say, well, let's see, a diamond ring? Oh, come on, Ma, no, it's not that little. It's bigger than that, see? Here, I'll go get it. I'll show you. You can look at the package. You know, well, anyway, this is building up. This giant scene is building up until finally, of course, Christmas Eve comes, which was when we had our Christmas gifts and all that stuff. So everybody, it's now about 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and we've had supper. And, you know, you're very nervous inside, and you're throwing up and everything else, and it's very terrible. And so finally the time comes. And at that point, you see, because I had built up this giant thing about the atomizer in my mind, I was really more interested in what she was going to think of the atomizer than I didn't, you know, I didn't even think about what I was going to get, you know. It's very strange because you can get really hung. And so there it was, there I hid it, you know, put it down here next to the thing, and the tree is there and all that. And I stick it out in front with a big tag, a giant tag on there, you know, to Mom, you know, that kind of thing. And so she comes, and finally they're opening the presents. Everybody's opening the presents. I'm looking. Hey, Ma, don't you want to open that? I wonder what that. There's that big one. Look at that. Hey, look at that one. The one over there behind the big. Wow, look, Ma. Well, finally she decides, you know, she's playing it pretty cool apparently, and she's playing it. She says, no, well, I'm not in any hurry. Actually, I'm not in any hurry. I'm really not in here. You just open yours. Look at this. Isn't this wonderful? A donut cutter. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, Uncle Carl, a donut cutter. Isn't that wonderful with a brass handle? Very good. So she's looking at her stuff. She says, oh, boy, what a wonderful bathrobe. She's looking at her bathrobe she got. All the while, there's this thing laying there. So she says, hey, Ma, there's one other one there. I wonder. So she finally picks it up. She says, well, let's open this one up. Well, she opened it up. Well, have you ever seen those corny takes? Those real corny takes that they do in the Class B movies that Dick Foran is doing all the time, or, you know, the Judy Garland has a penchant for doing this kind of thing. Oh, no, you know, that kind of thing. And my mother says, what? This is beautiful. Where did you get all the money to buy? This is just fantastic. She's really playing it. Look at this. And he holds it up and shows my father. She squeezes it. Ow, ow. It squeezes. He says, what is that? She says, look at that. This is something that I have always wanted. For years, ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted a perfume atomizer. I used to always look at perfume. She says, look at that. It's great. And of course, I'm sitting there, you know, and I'm beaming all over the place, and my ears are red. And she says, isn't that fantastic? Great. And my kid brother's grinning. He you know, held the secret all this time. So he says, hey, Ma, go get some perfume. Put it in. She says, okay, I'll do that. And so she takes her bottle of Evening in Paris. which she had received a giant 4-gallon bottle of Evening in Paris perfume. This is a giant bottle. That's the big one, the one that she had this big giant bottle. So she opens the top. I says, now you see, here's the way it goes. She says, I know how it works, and she unscrews the top. She takes the top, she takes this giant bottle of Evening in Paris, and she's pouring it in there. She tightens it all up. She says, now, okay, and it goes, ow, ow. Nothing comes out. She says, no, wait, maybe here. She shakes it, ding, 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 ding. She goes, ow, ow. Nothing comes out. I said, here, Ma, let me tighten the top. Tighten the top. Ow, ow. My old man says, here, wait a minute, let me check it. The fathers are always afraid. You didn't put it in right, for crying out loud. What's the matter with you women? He opens the top and he fools around with it a little bit, shakes it, blows it out, puts it back on. He goes, ow, ow. Nothing. Ow, ow. Nothing. And my mother says, well, that's all right. She says, it probably needs to get broken in. It probably has to get broken in. It'll probably work better tomorrow afternoon. It's Christmas and everybody's excited. It'll probably work better tomorrow afternoon. I'm sitting there under the tree. Work better. It won't work at all. It's terrible. It's rotten. It'll never work. It'll never work. And she says, now, wait a minute. Here, just a minute. Now, let's hold this thing. She shakes it again. Ow, ow. Oh, boy, was the Christmas going down the hot air register at that point. It was going down, flying, just dead. My old man takes it again. He goes, ow, ow, ow. He says, let me look at this thing. He goes out in the kitchen and he takes his pliers, and there was a little nozzle on the front. He takes this nozzle and he opens it up and he looks through. He says, for crying out loud, it's stuffed up. He takes a toothpick and he's poking it through like that. He's pretending like he's fixing it. So he's pretending. He says, here, it's stuffed up. He's there. He blows through it. He says, now it'll work. And he screws it back on again. Ow, ow, ow. He says, there, it's working. I said, let me see. He says, no, it's working. Don't worry about it. It's working. Ow, ow. He said, why don't you get back and play with the sled? Hey, Ann, it's working now. Ow, ow. Nothing is coming out, and he's hoking it up. Hey, it's working now, Aunt. Ow, ow, ow. Oh, what do you mean it's not working, Dad? It's not working at all. I can tell it's not working at all. Ow, ow. He's now, go on, go back. He's looking, it's working good. Here, you can smell the perfume. And, of course, this thing smelled of Evening in Paris from here all the way to Indiana Harbor and back again, Boy, and he holds it up. He says, smell that? I says, yeah. He says, well, now you see it's working, isn't it? Yeah. Even I wouldn't admit it. Yeah. My mom says, gee, it's working, isn't it? Yeah. We all agreed it's working. Yeah. All right. That's enough of that. Speaking of the non-working, this is WOR AM at FM New York.
It's WBAI New York, of course.
Boy, if you're planning, this is a terrible time to be telling you about your Christmas shopping, but if you have only one day, it's like tomorrow, man. And I would like to recommend the Pottery of All Nations. If you want to make some quick, really good, unusual gift selections, they import from all over the world. They got a couple of great things. And by the way, speaking of great things, they have a fantastic collection of glasses for over the holidays. Swedish, Polish, Glover, Slavonian, Russian, the whole scene. They got dissolving ones. They got dribble glasses. They've got the greatest collection of glasses in the world down there at great prices. And one more very interesting gift idea. Have you seen these Rome wine carafes, these wine measurers with the seal of Rome on them? Great gifts. They come in beautiful colors. And they're imported from Italy, and you can afford them. And they really are beautiful. So this is the Pottery of All Nations down on Sheridan Square, and they'll be open late tomorrow night. And they're also up at 64th and Lexington and Route 4 in Paramus. Pottery of All Nations. They have the French cookware. They have beautiful stuff there. Okay? This is a great time. This snow out here and all that, and all the people sludging around. I just came back from the dime store. That's why I was reminded of it. I always make the dime store a scene. And the dime store do they call it the dime store here in the East? Or they call it the 5 and 10 here? Well, the more popular term in the Midwest is the dime store. You're going down to the dime store. They really call it, well, they did call it the 5 and 10, but that was more of a square term for it. That was the 5 and 10. Yeah, everybody calls it the dime store. Well, the dime store I notice here has the rock and roll syndrome going all the way. I'm telling you, rock and roll comes out of everything in the dime stores. And it was interesting to note that during the holiday period, they have rock and roll carols. Cover the whole scene. And I guess the thing I dig about Christmas in the dime store is that people who look upon the dime store as a place to shop for gifts and so on are not ashamed of really all-out, complete, thorough, without any questions asked, sentimentality. They're nowhere near as hip as the Bonwit Teller crew, who really would never show any real emotion about anything. But it's great to see about 7 people all standing around a counter, great bunch of people thinking in terms of buying some gigantic plastic lamp that has the genuine lifelike features of the Taj Mahal. And it lights up and looks like a forest fire when it really gets heated up. They're all talking about whether Aunt Min would like this, and there's something really great about it, and has nothing to do with slobism or bad taste. It's something that transcends that. Well, this is a part of America, and I suspect part of the Western world, which is rapidly dying out. It will die out, and I would say probably within the next 30 or 40 years, hardly any of that will be seen. Because even the kids now who live in the slums generally are hip. They find in the trash baskets, they find New Yorker magazines of last week. They do not read the Police Gazette, So it's a different scene, and I every time at Christmas, I think of some of the great, and I'm not, I'm talking about an American sentimentality, which is very special. No other place in the world has ever developed the kind of frontier attitude towards baubles and tinsel and little things that flash and things that go round and round and make noises than the Americans. And I suspect this is because we are still in the last stages of being a frontier society. That you'll find in most foreign countries, the old societies, the old civilizations, you'll find very little of this, and very little of flash. And even among the lower classes, you won't find a guy, the people in Rome or people in places like, perhaps England, will not be given to this kind of thing as completely and wholeheartedly as you will find in America. I'll never forget doing on a Christmas Eve, a few eons back in my Neolithic period, I used to do a commercial. I was on one of these radio stations. Now, I bet not many of you know that large numbers of people in rural America and all over America, not only rural, what's so surprising really is you'll find it in New York too, but large numbers of people will buy their Christmas gifts by mail from radio stations that are heard at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we used to play, I remember on this radio station I was working at the time, I was going to school, and it was an all-night show that I was on, and this station covered everywhere. In fact, they were heard better on Guadalcanal than they were down the street from the transmitter. They even had a station break that said that. The only station heard regularly on Guadalcanal, and they meant it because they were. So they covered the Western Hemisphere like a gigantic festering blanket. And all night long, they have these mail-order spots for Christmas. And we would have records. I had about 10,000 records all stacked up, one on each turntable, all the way down, big slots. And I'm playing turntables on both sides of me and a microphone in front of me. And I am Santa Claus, in effect. I am the catalog. And all night long, there were guys sitting up, listening on their radios, figuring out what to get Ma. And you would say, friends, have you envied in those wonderful ladies' magazines those beautiful plastic aprons with floral and with Asiatic and with Holland patterns in sensational, beautiful household, beautiful clear colors? Yes, it's the sort of plastic apron that your wife would love to have for this Christmas. And, and we will include, if you will send your name and address in just 20 minutes, if you will get on the phone and give us a call in just 20 minutes, we will include the smallest Bible ever printed as an extra bonus gift. Yes, an extra bonus gift that will be sure to, and this kind of thing. Well, then there was and yet, it was kind of pathetic in a way, because the mailroom would be filled with thousands and thousands and thousands of letters and terrible illiterate scrawls. People can hardly write. And they didn't even know. Can you imagine people didn't even know how to write W-O-R? Believe it or not. You know what they would do? They would literally write down, for example, if your call letter was W-O-R, they would write down W, and they would write down a W and a U. Many people do not know that a W is a W for some reason. Yes, did you know that? That's a nutty kind of illiteracy. And they would write down W-U-O-R with dots. Rado. R-A-D-D-O. Yes, Radostaton. S-T-A-T-O-N. And then you would open up the letter. I never did, because there was that 8 million letters. It would say, Dear Sir. Believe it or not, S-E-R-E, D-E-R-S-E-R-E, 1 Roy Acuff Bank, please. And it would say Roy Acuff, R-E-Y. How they would get that, I don't know. R-E-Y-A-C-O-F-F, Roy Acuff Bank, B-A-N-C, please. Box 175RR1 rabbit hash KY. It would come like that. and you kind of feel sorry, and they're ordering a Roy Acuff Bank that plays Red River Valley every time you put a penny in it, that kind of thing. And it's for Christmas, and it's a part of Christmas that you just never. One of the things we sold on Christmas all the time that was one of the great was the revolving forest fire lamp. And yes, the revolving forest fire lamp, when you would plug it in, and I would say, have you ever envied those neighbors and friends of yours who have a beautiful, like real, revolving forest fire lamp? Yes, a beautiful lamp that gives you all the thrill and excitement of a forest fire in the great North Woods. Every time you plug this lamp in and the bulb heats up, it is harmless. It is just a toy, but one of the most beautiful home decorations ever devised by the hand of man. The revolving forest fire lamp makes a perfect Christmas gift for that elderly aunt, for that young housewife on your list, and yes, indeed, for your very own lovely helpmeet. Yes, the revolving forest fire lamp makes the perfect Christmas gifts for everyone. It makes a wonderful gift for a boy who is just putting together his first room. A revolving forest fire lamp is full of excitement and joy and beauty. And so you get a revolving forest fire lamp. And then there was another one. Yes, there were a lot of things for Christmas. And this kind of thing is, of course, rapidly dying out in America. I'm sure there it is. It just is, because we're rapidly ceasing to be a frontier place. And I'm sure that people who sit and watch television now and watch the Jackie Gleason, and everyone will say to me, gee, that must have been 100 years ago. No, it was not, as a matter of fact. It was in the 50s. So it's just, and even if you do tune in now late at night at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you will hear still the vestiges of it going on. I can remember one thing. Have you thought that you just can't think of any ideas that are really unusual and different to give that wife of yours for Christmas? Well, the quilt lady, ladies and gentlemen, is prepared to give you a 4-pound package of the most beautiful quilt materials, patchworks, and, it's a quilt. It's not a quilt at all. It's just a big bag of rags that are cut up in little squares for quilting. And that's a Christmas gift. And somehow, it's a great Christmas gift when you think about it. But this is the sort of thing that is part of a rapidly disappearing America. And I'm delighted to know, I'm delighted to feel that I had a little part, that I was there a little bit, even if I was just a kid, reading these things on the air, that somewhere, someplace, out in some real far remote fastnesses in Arkansas, some guy was fantastically thrilled by the idea of a revolving forest fire lamp. He's just sitting there, Ma, I've been thinking about that corner there, that corner there next to the deer head. I've been thinking, and you just, it's a great thing. I remember one time, it was a suggestion for mothers. I'll never forget this one, for mothers and wives. And it says, Ma, Do you have a man who likes to go out and hunt rabbits? Do you have a man who likes to go out and hunt woodchucks and possums and raccoons? Do you have a man who likes to own a real hunting knife with a long 12-inch blade with a beautiful serrated edge and a big, beautiful laminated handle that just fits in a man's hand like a true weapon? Well, you know, I mean, can you imagine a commercial for a big 12-inch toad sticker? A big hunting knife for guys that like to go out in the woods and hunt woodchucks. Well, that, you know, this is Americana. You won't get much of this in Staten Island or Queens, I'll tell you. But nevertheless, that was all part of the gift suggestions. And what would probably surprise most people here, since we live in such a totally, well, I suppose you might say urbanized complex here in the Eastern Seaboard, that we're all within a short distance of some kind of a tremendous shopping area. What would surprise you is the amount of mail and the number of things that are sold through the mail in a radio station of that kind. I'll never forget when the mail used to come in around Christmas time. I remember one wild Christmas week when the mail came in, and every day of that week we would have Pinkerton guards standing on guard in the mail room. Why, you could do better knocking over the mailroom than you could knocking over the Manhattan National Bank. What we used to have in the mailroom at almost any given time in dollar bills, negotiable dollar bills in letters, we had up to $40,000 and $45,000 on every mail call. Yes. Oh, yes. In fact, this radio station in one 2-month period took in by mail at a Christmas, just before Christmas, that whole holiday season, just a little bit under $250,000 in cash in the mail. So that's really you're dealing with big kale, and this is all part of it. I speaking of that great disappearing commodity, the unabashed sentiment in American life. Here is a poem, which is a Christmas poem that in fact, the first time I did this, I'm going to give you a clue. The first time I did this was on that all-night radio station, and I did this poem, and I did it all the way. It was a fantastic, emotional, wrenching experience. And I had music playing behind me. Well, I could hear a stunned silence when I finished that. You can really hear it when you're on the air. You believe it or not, You can feel audience reaction. There was a stunned silence. And I could hear a gigantic cascade torrents of an outpouring of genuine, honest, reliable, sober, American sentimental tears. It sounded like the Johnstown flood. And then the phone started ringing. They were calling in from all over the country. George, will you tell that young man on the radio I never heard such sentiments in my life, and I just want to tell him. Do you want to hear that poem, Walt? All right, sneak in some of that sentimental, some of that low-down music here. Oh, gotta set the scene. It's Christmas Eve. Do you see the scene, folks? It's Christmas Eve. And a low, dark, stormy sky is just hanging over there. You got it? And it's a cold Christmas Eve and the wind is howling. A bootblack slept in a dry goods box. It was on a Christmas Eve. Though all alone in his scanty home, in Santa Claus he did believe. He slept on rags and straw, and then he placed his little shoes outside, just as he hung his stockings up before his mother died. The night rolled on, and no Santa came, but a thief crept soft and low as he stole away those little shoes that were left standing in the snow. Sad, sad indeed, to see the lad standing in the storm, alone, beside the empty dry goods box that served him as a home. And the look of disappointment. Santa Claus did him refuse. But saddest of all was to hear him call, Santa Claus, bring back my shoes. But a moment's time had scarcely passed till I was beside the lad. What makes you weep? Dear boy, I said, have you indeed not got a dad? Oh, no, kind sir, he said with a beseeching look to me. My poor mother died a year ago. Papa was lost at sea. I started back when I heard this tale, for I was returning home. Then I scanned his face. What did I trace? It was the outline of my own. I grasped the box. As I held my child in a father's fond embrace, I could feel that my brain was whirling and the hot tears rolling down my face. On a whale ship, I sailed for 6 months' voyage to sea. I was wrecked and cast on a foreign shore where none could hear from me. The truth was clear. My wife, so dear from earth, had passed away. I had played the part with broken heart of Santa Claus that Christmas Day. Oh, thank God indeed to find my boy, although in the storm alone, beside the empty dry goods box that served him as a home. I dispelled his disappointment. Santa Claus will not refuse, for your father has come. My dear own son, I will buy you new shoes. Oh, man. That was by Barney Mullally. It was a late 19th century Christmas ode, the Boot Blacks Christmas. Listen, if I played the Bums Christmas for you guys here tonight, you just wouldn't be able to go home. I don't want to play that one. The scenes, the terrible scenes in the Salvation Army, you don't want to hear that one, do you? Oh, yeah. Well, this is all part of it. I remember, it's a funny thing. And I'll tell you another little odd thing that might perhaps, it's not odd, it's just part of the passing scene. And anyone who has been in radio or in the public media of any length of time can tell you that there's been a tremendous amount of difference or changes come about in the, what you can call, I suppose, the sentimentality of the American people. For example, one of the most, probably one of the most touching things that anyone who's ever been in radio can tell you about is around about Christmas time. There would arrive, it's hard to describe to you what kind of things would arrive, but there would be thousands and thousands of gifts would arrive for people who did radio shows. That the people living way out in the backwoods, people who lived in hills and valleys way out there by the lakes and streams and the mountains of America and the little small towns, would feel a real connection with the world through these people. And these people who were on the radio would become really as much a part of their life and their family as their family was. Now, this is not a silly thing, really, you see, because they recognized another human being out there. Of course, in our time, very few people recognize another human being. They recognize all of mankind, but not any specific human being. This is a kind of the new cool world where a man, a writer, for example, can have tremendous compassion for mankind. But he wouldn't drop a nickel in the box, believe me, if the guy was in his last gasp. He'd say, you bum, you should have worked hard in your life, that kind of thing. There's a big difference. So you would come into the radio station and there would be great piles of things. Now, the kind of things that we got really were, again, part of that passing America. I used to get, for example, I remember for a long time, I had a pair of hand-knitted mittens. Well, now, these were mittens. I mean mittens, the kind of mittens that a guy who lived in the city couldn't possibly wear, great big green mittens that were hooked together by a long knitted green cord. Now, I could not quite see myself coming into the radio station, this is where there's a big city, and I've got my big green grandma mittens on with the cord that goes around and clips back of your collar, you come in. Well, they used to send me these, this kind of thing, and everywhere you go, apparently in America, grandmothers make one kind of pudding and one kind of pie or one kind of cookie or another that they're famous for. And so they would decide that the thing to do on Christmas was to do, it was like the ultimate for them, was to send you a box of these cookies or send you a box of this pie, whatever it might be. So we would be loaded with pies by the thousands and cookies and cakes. And it was just a genuine gesture of friendliness. Now, these people did not expect you to say their name on the air because you didn't, you know. They did not expect you to in any wise acknowledge it, because they were always amazed if you ever wrote them a letter back and say, Dear Ma Williamson, I sure enjoyed the cookies. In fact, the whole gang here around the old hot stove, we just sat and munched and chomped on them cookies. And in fact, old Luke, you know, busted a tooth on that walnut you stuck in that big one. You know, that kind of thing. They never expected that kind of thing. So it was a very different way, a different world. And Christmas cards were not quite as big as they are now. In other words, the card today, which is a machine-made operation, and many people will just send out Christmas cards compulsively. They'll send out Christmas cards to the guys they passed on the street. This is a wild scene. And yet they do. I know some people who have lists. I mean, these little people. These are not people with great public relations problems or anything like that. These people will have lists of, say, 1,200 people they send Christmas cards to. The guy that used to fix their fenders in the garage, in 1938, that guy. And it's an attempt somehow, I suppose, to hang out to some kind of a real world, even if it isn't real at all. Somehow assure yourself that you have a great swinging life. There's a great conglomerate of existence going on around you, and that you're the vortex of it. Well, the Christmas card, I think, has militated, in a sense, against any genuine expression. It's interesting when you get large numbers of Christmas cards to see how many repeats you get. You'll get the same Christmas picture or the same, and you can always tell how hip a person is by the kind of artwork on his card. And there's this kind of sameness about all of these things. But I still remember getting these battered boxes. And a battered box would come, and it's all splattered with ink, and it's been sweated over, and you can see 9 people have tried to tie it, and it hasn't worked. And inside is a Fannie Farmer candy box that somebody saved from last year when Beth had her birthday, and the box is all battered and squashed on one end, and there's all kinds of tissue paper, and there is a gingerbread man in there with a busted leg. And oh yes, this is a genuine, a really genuine piece of. It's reaching out and touching, or trying to touch, and literally touching you. This stuff, you never find any of this written in novels or books or comments about the American scene. But I will tell you this is practically a unique American phenomenon. I have talked to people in radio stations all over the world about this thing, and none of them have ever had this happen to them. Oh, once in a while, someone will send them a book, or someone will send them some kind of maybe a record or something like that, but never a gingerbread man. The same gingerbread man that they gave their kids, or the same gingerbread man that was given to the nephews. She made 10 of them, so she sends one to the guy she listens to on the radio every night. And don't think for a minute that the people in the radio stations did not respond to this. That's on the contrary, because this is the kind of thing you can't help but respond to. You'd have to be some kind of a monster. You'd have to be half dead. But it's a passing thing, and somehow being part of it and seeing a little bit of it was one of the better things that have happened to me in this business. Keep your knees loose and have a good one.
Merry Christmas.
And with Tina Turner in the background, wow, who's been playing with these headphones? That's been Mass Backwards for another week. We'll be back next week. That was Gene Shepard from December 23rd, 1963, to close out this program. And yes, we're back on Sunday night as well for the golden age of radio, our post-Christmas letdown show this week. So tune in 7 to 9 Sunday for the golden age, and next week for Mass Backwards. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for Wake Up Call, which follows very shortly here at WBAI, New York.
From December 25, 1963, thinking about the real American Christmas. Listening to the radio on Christmas Day.
You're interested, and I'm not on tape, which I rarely am, for obvious reasons. Being live, actually, is a cop-out. It's much more of a cop-out than being taped. A lot of people think taping is a cop-out, but actually it's the other way around, because I find that if you're live, you can't hear yourself, and therefore you don't have the terrible qualms of conscience which the guy does when he's taped. Almost every guy I know who's taped walks around and looks embarrassed. For years he hears himself. No, I'm very live, and let us officially say at this juncture now that Christmas is almost over, and I might say before we go any further that I'm feeling irascible. That what happens late Christmas Day is most people feel fat. Sort of decadent and greasy and kind of rotten, and you do everything too much. You just sort of sit around and look grimly into the middle distance. And this is not going to be one of those Robert Benchley type programs talking about how terrible holidays are. They're not. The holiday itself is a phenomenon. I mean, all holidays. Every tribe everywhere has the holiday thing. Ever think much about that? The whole thing, other than the actual reason for a specific holiday, but the fact that holidays exist in all cultures. And there's always one holiday, you see, that's bigger than all the others. In every culture, they have one big giant bust, one big bust out, whatever it happens to be. There's one tribe, for example, in some island out in the Dutch Guiana group. When they have their big bust out, they all gather and they kill everything. They just hit everything for miles around, and they all stand around and yell and holler, and then after they get through killing it, they eat it. Whatever it is they've killed, they eat, and then they all go home staggering. They're fat. And, of course, the thing that you got to understand is that all the rest of the year they don't eat at all. They're in the middle of a famine all the time. They have a perpetual one there. So the bust out comes once a year. Well, now, we have a love bust out once a year. You close the door there. I can hear him yelling and hollering. Ted's entertaining the whole crowd. So we have a once a year big love bust out, and our famine, of course, is hardly anybody cares about anybody most of the year. Just like those tribes out there in the Pacific, they don't eat much during the year, so once a year they eat. Well, hardly anybody cares about anybody else most of the year, really. I mean, we do a lot of talking. But then comes the big love bust out, and we have this fantastic thing, which is a great thing. But it takes some interesting forms. For example, I have a slight buzzing in my ears now at this point because I subjected myself to roughly 9 hours of listening to Sirius FM station Christmas programming. And there are very few things more ponderous, less joyous than the joyous programming of the Sirius FM stations regarding this, the most joyous occasion of Christendom. It's a kind of an interesting thing to hear some of it. One station, for example, seems to confuse Christmas with, I'd say roughly, the 17th century of English history. Somehow they confuse Christmas with guys playing recorders. And you never heard more recorder playing in your life. And bad recorder, nothing is more depressing than tall, thin, Bennington blonde girls who have somehow wrangled the recording contract and are now blowing for some company called Recorder Archives, something of that nature, and they blow away on little-known pieces of music from the 17th century, and they all pop up at Christmas time, and you can see why they're little-known. They were bad when they were written, and they're bad today, which I like to say that man has an ability to sift the dross from the gold. But this never occurs, the FM stations. And then, of course, there's always the half-hour or sometimes the 17-hour program, which comes on by special tape from the BBC. And it features a distinguished British actor. And he is doing selected readings from Christmas literature of the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. And so, little children, I am about to tell you the story of the Christmas elf. The Christmas elf one day was walking through the green sward, and he came upon a little girl who had not been too good. And you wonder who's listening to this. Certainly not the kids. They're all sitting there buried in Playboy or Mad Magazine, and Mama and Papa are flaked out. One is sculled out on the daybed, and the other's trying to figure some way to get out and get down to the office. Just to get out, and the FM set is going, and so the little girl returned to her home and said, "Mother, I am going to tell you that tonight we are going to be visited by the Christmas elf. The Christmas elf, which is the spirit." Oh boy, nothing is worse than an English actor making an LP to be sold at Christmas time to serious kids by serious mothers and fathers who are Anglophiles from way back. One having gone to a well-known English-oriented ladies' school near Boston, and the other having been kicked out of Harvard at the end of the third year. And so naturally they're British to the core. And they maintain that the recorder was the only. But then, of course, you can go on and on about this thing. I heard one guy all night long. I turned on an FM station, and all night long this guy was trying to get people to call him up, and there was a note of hysteria in his voice. This is another kind of radio show which it passes for entertainment, and he does things like this. You know, I want you folks out there to know that this program is for you, and I'd like to say that we just had a wonderful conversation with Jim out in Staten Island, who says that they've decorated the tree there, and the kiddies are all in bed. And we had a phone call from Gwen in Babylon, and Gwen said to say Merry Christmas to all, and she's a regular listener. And blah, 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 blah. This goes on, and you wonder who these cheeseheads are that are listening to other guys making telephone calls and talking about other guys' telephone calls to somebody they don't know. But it goes on and on and on. And in between time, to show that the true spirit of Christmas is there, he is playing famous old Christmas melodies by Billy Daniels, famous old Sacco Christmas songs by Eddie Fisher, and various other Christmas images of our world. So it's funny, you know, there's a great deal of difference between the Christmas carol and the Christmas song, as turned out by the boys in the Brill Building. You know, there's a great deal. Although the tendency today has been to meld the two, because when you write a Christmas song in the Brill Building, you get a lot of sleigh bells behind. It doesn't make any difference who's yelling it out, Paul Anka or Fabian. I think you get the bells going to rock and roll sounds, you know. And you Christmas time, Christmas all the way, rick-a-tick-a-ding ding, and it goes. Has nothing whatsoever to do, even remotely, with Christmas or anything. I've often wondered who was it? Gregory. Yes, the Gregorian chants. You want me to go into the long, involved discussion of the Gregorian chants here tonight? Well, I've got something here. I suppose this will be the only program done of this kind this time, because I've noticed that whenever Christmas time comes around, there is a general looking toward Europe on the part of most of the radio stations, and in fact in the record shops and so on. By looking towards Europe, I mean this: we look to Charles Dickens for Christmas. He was not an American. I hate to tell you this, but Mr. Dickens was English to the core. And we either that, or we often will look to Italy. Italy seems to be a sort of center of Christmas. France, we have all kinds of French things in Christmas. The expression Noel and one thing and another. And most of the radio stations and TV stations that are seriously doing something about Christmas will spend hours playing German Christmas songs. I heard hour after hour last night of tall, heavy-set ladies singing German songs, Christmas songs. Still a good love. You know, they have a certain quality about them which is very special and really isn't part of the American Christmas scene. And I heard very little discussion of American Christmases, of really American Christmases on a serious plane, except maybe the John Gambling kind. Make sure to have a lot of things for the kids and just have a good time, drive carefully. That seems to be the most important Christmas greeting that people give on the radio, that sort of thing. But not much discussion of the American Christmas. Have you ever thought about, when you see all these Western movies, have you ever thought of what Christmas was like in the West, in the frontier days? They had Christmas then, too, and more so than we have, actually. Because they were far more religious people, by and large, than we are today. By religious, I mean they really were Orthodox religious people. And have you ever thought much about Christmas in the West, say in the 1860s, 1840s, 50s, in that period? Well, it was a pretty interesting phenomenon, as a matter of fact, and there are certain accounts of it left around, which should be brought out on Christmas time. We should read these things and talk about what they did in Christmas past in America. Do you know much about, say, Christmas in a place like Wisconsin? Well, there's one thing they do in these little towns out in the Midwest, and even in places in the South. I don't know whether it extends much to the East. I haven't seen much of it here in the East, although there is some evidence of it. In the Midwest, one of the big things for Christmas is the decoration of the town itself. Now, by that I don't mean some merchant puts a big display in his window. Somebody puts a big thing out, like the big cross, the big lights up here on the Pan Am building. I'm talking about the town itself. It has a big operation generally, and I can remember coming home from Christmas, for Christmas. This has been right after the war. I was driving from Cincinnati to Chicago. Now, driving from Cincinnati to Chicago, you drive through some of the most lush farm country in America. These gigantic Indiana farms and these huge southern Ohio farms. And this is really beautiful farm country, but as flat as a board. It's just absolutely so flat that you can sometimes see when you're coming out of Lafayette, Indiana, for example, which is maybe 75, 80 miles south of Chicago. You can see the lights of Chicago in the distance, just hanging up in the sky there. That's how flat that country is there. There's very little rolling hills there. Well, I can remember driving home because radio stations, as you know, don't turn off on Christmas. They don't turn off on any holiday. In fact, radio stations are rarely dead. Speaking of dead radio, this is WOR AM at FM New York. You look so sad. Of course, Ed, that's not an editorial. It's just I can't help it if there's a stream of consciousness here going on and Freudian association. It just came up at the station break time. It's not. You can't log that now. Nothing to do with that. But nevertheless, I can remember one night driving home.
There's a funny scene. It was a very odd scene. I had finished my radio show, and the one thing you know when you're on during a holiday is that there aren't like 10 people listening. Just forget it, nobody's listening at all. And now I know that I'm talking to 2 guys in the control room, at least one. The other one is not here at all, except in body. And the guy out at the transmitter has been flaked out since 8 o'clock. He's just sitting there next to the fan there. And he's got a TV set going on, and it ain't Channel Whoopee either. That's the thing about it. The telephone operator here at the station has been watching television since the fall of 1951. And she's been watching the same channel. It ain't 9, in case you're interested. She doesn't know what channel it is, but that's the only channel her set gets. And that lady does not even know she's in the radio business. And matter of fact, once in a while when the phone rings and they say, I'm a listener, she says, what? She says, I'm a listener. Listener to what? She says, the radio station. And our telephone operator says, oh, well, all right. What do you want me to do about it? She says, well, I'm listening to you. She says, no, you're not. And that's the end of that. She cuts him off. Another nut sits there. She thinks she's at the stock exchange, and it's late 1929, which may be true. But nevertheless, so a guy working in a radio show has a very radio station at this time of year has a very difficult operation to bring himself up to the kind of tension that is required to maintain a show. It's like an actor. It's like an actor performing without an audience. You come out there and nobody's got the props, and you just sort of fool around. It's pretty hard to be Hamlet when there's nobody sitting out there in the seats. It really is. And especially when the stagehands are all sitting behind there playing bingo and picking their teeth. It's, and what's worse, when you look over to see if Polonius is around, Polonius is playing pinochle with Ophelia. So, it's tough being Hamlet. But I'm driving home one night to Chicago from Cincinnati, and boy, was it dark. It was really dark. I had finished my show, which was about 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:45, and I go out and I get in my car and I said, well, I'm going to go home for Christmas. I had to be back the next day for the next show. You see, well, I'm going to go home for Christmas. Well, that's about 350 miles from Cincinnati to Chicago, and it's through some of the darkest country this side of the Mojave Desert. I can tell you that. So I get into the car and I whistle out of Cincinnati, and immediately, as soon as I get past Cleves, Ohio, it gets black. I mean, black is the inside of your pocket. It's really pitch black, and my Ford is boring into the darkness there, and I'm whistling along. And I got the radio on, and I begin to pick up right away. As soon as I got out of Cincinnati, I pick up a guy who is broadcasting from Chicago. And it is Christmas night. And he is completely, you can just hear him, he is just going along, he's like just coasting. He's got maybe one notch of his accelerator open there. He's just got a very lean mixture coming through the carburetor. And he is just coasting, and you could not, it would be impossible for me to tell you how much cool cynicism was coming through this guy. He was just sort of laying it out, and he was playing, he happened to have a music show, and he was playing only the stuff that he wanted to play. He didn't care about the audience tonight. He knew there wasn't any. And so he was belting this stuff out and making smart, rotten remarks between every record, and he was going along there, having a great time. And I always remembered that guy because I tracked him all the way into Chicago that night. Later on, he became a very famous guy and went on to become one of the biggest entertainers in the TV radio business. But at that night and that time, I'm sure he doesn't even... He had 15 minutes of commercials that night, which he was doing for a dance studio in Chicago. And you could not imagine at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning any more really cynical dance commercials than this guy was putting on. Eddie, he would imply that if you came down to this place, you could find yourself dancing for the first time and probably the only time in your life with a female gorilla. If you've always wanted to dance with a gorilla, you can find one down there. And not only that, if you are a gorilla, they don't care. You come down and you can dance with a pretty girl. For all of you rotten people, there's your chance. You know, he goes on. Well, it was great. I was whistling in on the beam there, listening to this guy. And it was Christmas Eve. Not Christmas Eve, it was Christmas night. Well, the point that I'm getting to, as I was coming through these little towns. It was a curious thing to see as you are, say you're going up 52 or 41, US 41, which bisects Indiana, goes directly right up Indiana, right whistling into Chicago. As you go through these tiny towns, little towns like Otterbein and Jerusalem, you should go through Jerusalem, Indiana at 3:30 on Christmas night. That's an eerie experience. But there's the big sign that says Jerusalem, Indiana. And you come whistling at Jerusalem, by the way, is the way it's pronounced out there. You start coming into Jerusalem, and there's a great big white and black sign. It says Jerusalem, the garden spot of Indiana. It says it kind of angrily. And then you pass another sign. It says Kiwanis meets Wednesday nights at the Five Fields Drugstore. Then you whistle on a little bit further. It says Burma Shave. There was a young man from Ozizes whose ears were of 2 different sizes. One day he took his razor and whipped off his ear, and now he's using Burma Shave all the time. Whoopee. Well, you're driving along, then you're coming into a little town like Jerusalem or Versailles or one of those towns down in southern Indiana. And the first thing you see from about 40 miles out, Ed, is a Christmas tree glow in the sky. Because they leave the lights on all night there, you see, and the town itself corks off about 9 o'clock. This is strictly 9 o'clock country, I'm telling you. They just don't see anything on any television channel past 9:15. And they sort of doze off and they're gone. There's nothing else to do in that town, you know. You just sleep. Well, about a half a mile out, you begin to see what it is. And hanging across the street, they have these low lines of red and green lights hanging across the street, you know, in arches from one street lamp to the other, right down the main street. And on top of every street light and on top of every telephone pole, there is a Christmas tree, and usually some kind of a Santa Claus stuck up there, and these red and green lights, and a few tinsel wreaths, and this extends the entire length of the main street. That means well over a block and a half. And as you come whistling into this sad little town, there's probably in many of those little towns, you'll come into these little places like, and in the background, in my mirror, I can see those funny red and green lights that they hang over these little towns. You know, the whole thing about it is that these towns celebrate Christmas in a very different way. They don't celebrate it primarily by buying. And I want to read something, if I can find it here. A great story, if I can find it now. I don't really know whether I had. Let's see. I'm going to read you a George Ade story. No, that's not it. A George Ade story about Christmas in a little town. And George Ade, as you know, was a fine... I met S.J. Perlman at a party the other night, and Ade is Perlman's favorite humorist. He says not only was he a superb humorist, but he was a magnificent writer. He could turn a phrase like nobody in American letters before or since. He could say... Now, if I can find this thing here, let's see. Oh, shucks. Let's see. The Fable of the Good Fairy with the Lorgnette and Why She Got It Good. Great names. Let's see. I really want to read this to you because it's about Christmas time and how they celebrate it. A fable of the good people who rallied to the support of the church. The fable of the skittish widower. The fable of the candy commercial salesman. Let's see. Well, I'm just sorry that I can't find it here tonight. Any of you got your Ade book out there? You got your... No, I can't find it. Shucks. Nope. I'm just going to have to give it up because I'd have to find it because there's so many of them in here. And It's a beautiful fable about shopping in a small town. You want to take a look through this, Lee, if you'd like to, and see if you can find it here. Yeah. It's the fable of the guy who saved up his money to buy the gift. You remember that fable? The one about the Santa Claus? They so quick. Do it in here. Where are you going in there for? Do it in here. Hey, just so you can read it. But I wonder just how much in the way of American Christmas we ever talk about here in this country. It's very little. Very, very little. I remember different towns and different ways they celebrated Christmas. I remember living in this, as I say, in Indiana. When Christmas was celebrated, it was more of a, it was less of an English Christmas. As a matter of fact, the only relationship we ever had with foreign Christmases in those days, by foreign Christmases, I'm talking about foreign, ideas, foreign traditions, and so on, was that every Christmas Eve, I'll award you a brass figurine if you can remember, Ed, who every Christmas Eve performed on the radio. It was a gigantic thing that they all over the country they listened to it. It was the one thing, all over the country everybody listened to it. There was one performer who performed Scrooge on the radio. This was listened to in everybody's home that I know of at the time. Who was it? No, it's very funny how quickly those things are completely forgotten, and yet in those days it was a tradition that everybody just didn't miss. That was it. Everyone listened to this on Christmas Eve. Now, I don't know what the parallel would be. I don't think there's anything like that on television. Not any one thing that everybody watches. There is no unifying thing that everybody is involved in, say, in our mass media, the way they used to be in this show. Ask him, see if he remembers. Who was it who did Scrooge every Christmas Eve on the radio? Who? Yeah, that's right. Do you remember what a tradition that was? All by himself he did it. He was just magnificent at that. And what was that? Yeah. And the program was always introduced by music that he himself had composed. He would compose this music and perform almost the entire thing, and it was a long show. But if I remember rightly, it came on late at night, didn't it? It came on maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and it was a tradition. In fact, I believe that most of the time he did it live. And it was like like as if the whole nation had one single thing that it did at once. It was like the whole nation had a party for an hour and a half. The good storytellers are very rare. There aren't many people who can genuinely tell a story, who can really get involved in telling a story, and who can create a whole world with just a few words and with a feeling. And with passion, and this man did it. He was just magnificent on that show, and he used to come on. And I remember it was just like nobody was on the streets for those hours. It was like an hour and a half, maybe 90 minutes, something like that. It was just everybody stopped. I'm surprised you don't remember it, Ed. It was a tremendous thing, and he was magnificent. But not only was it a tradition, but it became more than that, really, in a sense. It became sort of a unifying factor. Now, I don't think we have anything nearly like that anymore. You know, I suspect that this country is dividing up into various countries as opposed to the way we always envision America. We always envision America as one big country. But have you noticed that Congress, for example, is finding it more and more difficult to get along with the president? Well, there's one theory, that's been put forth, that this is because of the growing regionalism. Now, that's not just the South. So everybody thinks of the South. Oh, no. The far West has all of its axes to grind. The Middle West has its axes to grind. Certainly the East does. and the South, and very few people are grinding the axe of the United States. They're grinding their own axe, and if their own axe is well sharpened and the old pork barrel is filled, if their dams are being built, then they're ready to grind a few other axes like the axe of the United States. But the poor president, of course, these days has to battle tooth and nail. It seems that the only function that the Congress has is to complain, to constantly buck and fight and refuse to have anything to do with the world, if at all possible. Well, in the days that I'm talking about, the country seemed to be less regional. In short, a radio program would be listened to by people all over the country. There was no differentiation. No one said, well, this is a regional show. This will be only in this area. This will be only in that area, and so on. The whole point being that everyone did listen to, say, Jack Benny. Today, if we're going to celebrate Christmas on television, I noticed that I was looking at some of the channel ads, that they will celebrate it by playing a movie, their own movie. Usually, it's some kind of a movie. It's like a Christmas celebration movie, and usually it's some movie with Margaret O'Brien that was made roughly in 1936, that kind of thing. And that's a great Christmas celebration. Or you'll play an old Edmund Gwenn movie, Miracle on 34th Street, some ancient movie that wasn't very good even when it first came out. And so this idea of a celebration of Christmas is always, today, an operation that smacks just a little bit of the return of King Kong and other special films for those of you who enjoy bad films at low rates with a lot of commercials. It's all part and parcel of a kind of, I suppose you might say commercial. This kind of commercialization, by the way, of Christmas is rarely talked about. Most people will talk about the department stores. They'll talk about this outfit down there is big promotion. But the commercialization of the special late-night commemorative film program with added inserts of added commercials and songs. Just keep them loose. We'll be back.
From December 30th, 1963, right at the start of the show, the engineer rewinds tape on the air. Playing football when it's cold and hot. Shepard thinks the proposed bubble baseball stadium to be built in Houston is a bad idea. Unintendedly satire, Goldwater Cologne. The myth of controlling history.
Great night. What a magnificent... hello there. What are you doing there on the air? Boy, you know that went out, don't you? All that stuff. You're playing commercial programs on the non-commercial radio show. You're going to have to log that, you know. And it's a very scary thing. I'll never forget the night that somebody, by mistake, put the John Gambling theme, and there were 2 heart attacks and 1 terrible, terrible stroke that was suffered by a lady up in Westport. There's an awful thing, but we're here. It's a magnificent night. I'll tell you, this kind of night, with the wind and the snow and all the stuff blowing around, it either brings the roses to the cheeks, it brings a touch of the spook to that deep old soul. I don't know. The New Yorker is a very funny thing. Do you have the vague feeling that you enjoy underneath it all what appears to be on the surface a disaster? that the reality of a disaster is very enjoyable because so much of our life is totally unreal, you know? It's very little to find that's real. And you sit and you watch movies. I suspect that most people today live about 95% of their life enjoying vicariously other people's lives through the medium of plays, movies, books, et cetera, et cetera. And there's very little actual movement done, although I suspect that a lot of people today define life as going to movies and plays and reading books. That's what life is. And all the other jazz in between, like earning the dough to buy the books, to pay for the plays, is just a drag, you know. It's just the stuff you have to put up with so that you can see Arthur Miller's newest insight into real life. And it's so when the day comes when it snows, or when it rains, or when the flood hits, there's one of two reactions you can have. Either there is the wild, exultant thrill of suddenly finding yourself involved in something that actually gets your ankle wet, it actually gets you stuck, or else there is the fantastic panic of a man who is totally abdicated and is now completely vicarious. The great panic where he immediately leaps into the nearest air-conditioned bar and sits there until next Wednesday when it's all melted and he come back out again. I believe that our city one day will be in the form of a giant bubble over the whole city, and we will have finally achieved what Freud always said we wanted to do anyway. It's a return to the original mother cocoon, and that will be carefully heated to blood temperature or thereabouts, and it will be filled with Muzak. And there will be an artificial sun that can be turned off and on at will, depending on the majority vote, of course. And once in a while there will be a symbolic storm that will be held in a stadium where we can all go and watch the storm, and we'll get wet a little bit. Now, of course, the water will be very carefully controlled, filtered, and it will be heated, so it won't get you too wet. Have you read about this insane baseball field they're building down in Houston? Sure, it's going to be the first totally enclosed ball field, which is the final. This is going to be the final defeat of baseball, I suspect. That one of the great things about baseball, in fact all sports, is not only the fact that you're fighting against the rules of the game, like trying to get the ball from your goal line to the other guy's goal line, but also the vagaries of nature, the turf, and all the rest of it that goes to make up the life we're living in. Did you notice that how incensed all the New York sports writers were that it was cold in Chicago when the Giants got their you-know-what whipped? Well, somehow this was a plot by the Bears against the Giants. It was a terrible, rotten thing and should not have happened. It just shows the kind of skullduggery that is today goes on in professional athletics. Well, as a matter of fact, it was just as cold, I suspect, for the Bears. Now, the first thing you're going to say is they're used to it. Well, whoever gets used to kicking a football around at 10 degrees, I don't think they were any more than the Bears. But that's the way football is, friends. It is liable to be 10 degrees when you play. It is also liable to be 88 when you play. I'll never forget. Did I ever tell you about the time I played a football game when the temperature stood at 101? Oh, brother. Oh, gee. Oh, wow. Whew. Oh, man. I'll tell you, though. But nobody believed it was a plot. I mean, nobody says what we ought to do is put a bubble over the field and air condition it. It was 101 degrees, and it was that afternoon that convinced me that I was more of the sedentary type. It convinced me of a lot of stuff. First of all, I lost about 19 pounds, but what made it even worse was that the uniforms that we had a particular day were of knit wool jersey. Now today most of the uniforms, of course, you still find a lot of teams that will use that type of uniform. A light knit wool jersey is knit wool. Most of them, many of them will have nylon. A lot of them will have very light cotton, the breakaway cotton. So if you grab a guy by the back of the neck and he's going for 78 yards, the back just comes off. You know, it's the breakaway numbers and stuff. But we were wearing wool jerseys, and you put wool jerseys on. You put a pair of shoulder pads on you. You put sliding pads all over you, and you put hip pads on you, and then you put a pair of very tight football pants, which do not breathe, on you, and then you start running around at 101 degrees. Let me tell you, boy, I'd much rather play a football game at 10 above any day of the week because you generate a lot of ergs out there. You get a lot of BTUs going just in general running around. But down in Houston, they are going to put this ball field is going to be under glass. It's going to be totally controlled. Well, now this is going to do a lot of things. There is nothing more delightful than to see an outfielder racing out for a long shot up near the center field wall someplace, and the wind has got it, and he's going one direction, and the ball is going the other. And then all of a sudden he realizes this, makes this frantic leap, dives, slides on his face for 35 feet, and then makes a one-handed scoop. You won't see any of that in Houston anymore. It's all going to be about as exciting as a game of ping pong played at the Y. Really, it's going to take away one of the most important parts of the game. Then another part of the game, of course, is a pitcher who is fighting against the heat. This is a great thing to watch. Say, Whitey Ford, he wilts under real hot temperatures, and he really gets in trouble about the 5th or 6th inning. So a ball club is sitting in its dugout hoping that it gets hotter when they're playing against Ford. Come on, and Ford is out there sweating, and he's changing uniforms every 3 innings, and he puts on another one, and finally the 7th inning they get to him, and there is some excitement. Under the new system with the bubble, none of this will happen. Now, a lot of people say that's improving baseball. No, it is improving baseball about the way I would say, it's like improving plays by taking away all fluffs, taking away reality, breathing, walking around clumping, snorting, sweating, all the other stuff that happens in a real live performance. Take all it away, and you got nothing. You just got this drab thing going on. But nevertheless, the minute that I heard that this was going to happen, I thought, well, that's good. First of all, you realize that there are many pitchers who are wind pitchers. Nobody talks about wind pitchers. You know, Mike? You know what a wind pitcher is? A wind pitcher? Well, a wind pitcher is a pitcher who uses the wind. He's great on windy days. He loves to use the wind. And his curveball snaps off like a shot, boy, when he's pitching against the wind or in a crosswind. These pitchers, of course, under the condition with the bubble, they're just going to be like anybody else. Then there are a lot of things which I remember have gone out of sports because of this insistence on total control, absolute total control of the elements, as well as control of the ball. I remember watching ball games, for example, out at Comiskey Park, a day ball game, when there would be a lot of trains outside, a lot of trains going around in the roundhouse out there and going up and down into the 12th Street Station, and these great, great clouds of smoke and steam are coming in. Well, Mike Krivich, being a center fielder for the White Sox and being an ex-coal miner from Pennsylvania, was great at playing ball in the total dark. So Krivich could play the smoke better than any outfielder I ever saw. So they'd crack these long shots directly into the wind in center field in Comiskey Park, and it would disappear. You'd be sitting back at first base or something, and you'd just see the ball, and it would disappear into the smoke. Just disappear into the fog and the smoke, and you would see this tiny figure drifting around down there. He would play the smoke and the fog the way Willie Moschione, believe me, can play a three-cornered shot in balk-line billiards. He'd play the smoke, literally. Well, this is dead. Forget it. When I suppose somebody was up there defending the Giants. Huh? Well, there's a lot of problems here. I don't know whether to tap dance or not tonight, because sometimes where are you going to start? It's difficult to know where to start when if you work in let's say satire. It's for a long time now. Satire has become increasingly difficult to do. Have you read recently in newspapers? They say where are the great satirical comedies in the theater? Well, I'll tell you where they are. They're on the front page. Because it is impossible to satire a satire. It literally is. And so the final comedy will be eventually, I suspect, a total fantasy that will have nothing whatsoever to do with real life. A typical example of that is Oh Dad, Poor Dad, which is a comedy that does not refer to anything that ever happens. It's just a comedy. It just stands out there. Because how are you going to do a great satirical... Here's an example. How are you going to satirize this? Now, if I read you here is an ad for a perfume. It's called Goldwater. Goldwater. Do we have any Please, would you give me some... give me the tape over there. There, the big one there. See the round one? The tape. That's right. Give me cut 2 there, Tony. I will need patriotic music for this one. And I'm not going to needle it at all. I'm just going to read it straight. And I will ask you, how in the devil can you satirize this? Speaking of the devil, this is WOR, AM and FM, New York. And speaking of satires, self-imposed division, we'll be here until midnight. Sometimes, you listen real closely to the station, you wonder who's putting who on. Well, you all set out there? You got it in there, Tony? All ready? It's the second cut we must have. All set now. All right. All righty, row. While you're up to that, I see. All set now? All right. Now, we read this advertisement in its entirety and exactly the way it is printed in. All right, all set. Patriotic music. Let's go. Bring it up all the way. Now, let's go. Goldwater, a cologne for Americans. How to smell very nice. Splash on Goldwater. Spicy, partisan, and pungently American. Goldwater is actually an expensive department store fragrance, conservatively priced at $1.25 a bottle. Order Goldwater for yourself, your friends, and at least one liberal. Also great for raising funds for your favorite organization. Goldwater, the cologne for Americans. All together, gang, now. We're going to put it over the top this time. We are going to carry it to the very pinnacle. All together now, let's go, faster. Very good. Very good. And now, if you think that I am being funny, that is from a very serious political magazine. It is The New Guard, the official magazine of the Young Americans for Freedom. This is a notoriously deep-thinking outfit. And how can you satirize it? I mean, what are you going to do? You see, there you are. You can only stand and scratch. That anything that I would try to do about that whole scene would be paled in insignificance by the reality of the scene itself. Now, I guess a satirist works best under conditions of a certain kind of absolute morality. For example, I suspect that during the 18th and early 19th centuries, that the scene was a different scene. That the kind of morality that was not only implied but was actual in most of the lives of the day lend themselves to satire when these moralities were at war with the actuality of what was going on. In other words, a guy like, say, somebody like, I suppose Voltaire would be a good example. That Voltaire took a society which had a set of basic moral principles that it professed and, to a large degree, attempted to live up to. And then he held those principles up on one side and then painted on the other side of the page the picture of what actually was happening. And then you had satire. That was satire. It is very difficult, then, to satirize a society where there are no moral absolutes. Very difficult. Take Swift now. Certainly when Swift was writing about the English culture of his day, that England had a set of really stringent moral laws, rules, mores, attitudes, and so on, by which it lived. So when Swift talked about his adventures among the Weeninghams and the Yahoos, his adventures among the Lilliputians, Swift was comparing again the morality of an established thing that everyone had agreed upon and attempted to live up to, and then the attitudes and the actions that were displayed in reality. So here you had satire. It was very Very fine. But it's almost impossible to do satire. All you can do is read out of the paper, and you've done satire, literally. Now, I'm sure that a lot of angry people are going to call in and say, what did this rotten thing I did about gold?
From January 16, 1964, cold weather masochism in New York City. During a snowfall in New York, Shep recalls the Great Indiana Blizzard and the Old Man's Graham page. Part of the opening theme has been deleted. The date is subject to correction.
Come on now. Come on, that's enough of that jazz. Crying out loud. Time is running short. We're all getting closer to the end. We got to get on here. Going. Hey, why do we carry on this myth about it being cold out? What is with this New York idiocy about cold, schmold? Going. I'll sing you some cold weather ballads, Dad, here tonight. No, seriously, this is not even cold at all. Not even remotely cold. And yet, poor old New York sits here. This is the city of dynamic self-pity. How's that for a song lyric? Oh, this is the city of dynamic self-pity. The city that weeps in its beer. Yeah, this city really. I can tell you this, that I talked to my mother in Chicago last week. And at the time I was on the phone with her, she said, wait a minute. I said, how is it, Ma? How's the weather? And she says, oh, all right. And I said, well, how is it? She says, oh, well, wait a minute, I'll look out. And so I could hear her cracking the ice as she's looking out between the geraniums, in the kitchen to look at the thermometer that she's got strapped on the windowsill there, with the covered with ice floes. And I could hear her talking, and then she comes back to the phone. She says, it's about 12 below. I said, below zero. She said, what do you think? That's just the way it is, And here in New York, there's cold. And the guy on the radio is saying the temperature is now 25 degrees. It's a cold, terrible day, so don't go out, folks. 25 degrees. And this nutty city is the only city in the country yet that's hipped on skiing. What do you think you do? Where do you ski, you nuts? Crying out loud. This is a masochistic city if I ever saw one. On the one hand, they're all screaming, yelling, trying to get in and out of cabs, with hitting each other, trying to get into a heated cab. And those same louts are going up into Vermont, where it's 107 below zero, and busting their ankles. I suppose the next thing guys are going to work out some system where you can use a cab to ski in. Go down the side there with a... Yeah, really a nutty time. I don't like to. It's funny as an old frostbitten Midwesterner. This weather just gets my blood going good. It really does. That a guy who comes out of the wilds of northern Indiana and the whistling prairies of Illinois, it is only at about this time that his radiator begins to really move. Actually, truly, that there are certain metals, elements. That have different melting points, of course. That mercury, under ordinary circumstances, is actually melted. That it is ordinarily a solid. But yes, it is a solid. And during its regular room temperature life, it is melted because it's too hot. Well, this is literally the case with a good Midwesterner, that a Midwesterner does not begin to actually think good until the temperature is around 15 below. And yes, his overload relay begins to kick in, and everything starts to work. He begins to hum and sing and work it out. And I don't know whether I should tell you any really genuine cold weather stories here of that whistling prairie world out there where they really had cold. I'll tell you one night. Now, I don't want to. This is not in the way of nostalgia because it's still cold out there. Of course, you probably heard in the news, and nobody even thinks about it out there. They have news items about it here, but out there it's just the weather report. That there was 30 inches of snow, for example, in the last 5 hours in a town in Wisconsin. 30 inches. Well, I couldn't believe it. This afternoon, I'm hearing Bruce Elliott on, and there's a little piddling little snow coming down, like a little flakes, it's a little brisk, and he's announcing all the places that are closed. They're all closing up over in Jersey, and all the meetings that were scheduled for tonight, they're not going to hold them. Well, I suspect something right away, that those people that are not going, and all those meetings that are closing up, are chickening out and didn't want to be held in the first place. They were looking for the quickest out they could get. You know? And it's a fascinating thing. This is the land of the great cop-out. And the first flake of snow, and the entire school system of Long Island quits and goes home and watches television, which is what it always wanted to do anyway. Why don't you admit it? You're not interested in education out there, Long Island, for crying out loud. You're interested in swinging, making martinis and all that stuff. I know all about Long Island. Staten Island, oh, it's even worse. Terrible, terrible. Well, let me tell you, though, about one night. I remember vividly one particular night. There's a thing that Midwestern winters do that does not really happen here in the East, because we have an ocean here. And this ocean is a great tempering body. By that I mean, it acts like a big heater out there during the winter time, and it acts like a big cooler in the summertime. Well, there's no such thing really. The lake is the opposite in the Midwest. That the lake acts like it makes it even colder, because the lake, and I'm talking about Lake Michigan here, is an enormous flue. It really is. It brings the wind unbroken directly down from the Arctic Circle, which sweeps down over Michigan, and it whistles right down that lake, and it screams through the Straits of Mackinac, and whistles past Ludington and Benton Harbor, and it gains steam until finally, as it approaches the southern end of the lake, that wind is howling 150 miles an hour, and boom, it hits the shoreline there, sweeps over Hammond, Gary, and Chicago, and bathes it in what's left over from the Arctic Circle, and you can smell the polar bears. Oh, boy. And it goes down, of course, because of the way it is there, something happens that does not happen here. It is not at all uncommon for the temperature to drop 30 degrees in maybe a half an hour. I mean 30 degrees. Boom, boom, pow, thump. It goes down. I mean, you go out of the house, it's 40 degrees. You walk down, you get in your car, and you start your car. It's fine. The sun is shining. The car's going. And all of a sudden, you see the windshield is clouding over just while you're sitting there. And between grinds of your starter, it is now dropped down to 20. And just as you reach for the third one, it's down to 7 above. And the fourth shot of your starter, it's frozen. It's 10 below. You get out. Oh. I'm not exaggerating, of course, not much more than just maybe 5 degrees, but it really is a fantastic thing. I'll remember this. Now, here's one night. I'm going to give you what happens is this. You see, is because of the precipitous drop and the precipitous fluctuation of weather out there. Nobody anymore in Chicago. Nobody even talks about the weather. It's just there. Now, a guy who has lived next to the Grand Canyon for 500 years does not exclaim every morning at what a big hole in the ground is out there. He just walks around, and the world is composed of holes in the ground as far as he's concerned. And I can tell you, Arabs are never amazed at how much sand there is in the desert. That's just there. They are never talking about the heat. It is always there. It has always been there, and they don't even know it. And so the temperature may be 130 degrees, and that Sirocco is whistling along, and the wind is flying, and an Arab is just standing around picking his teeth. He's just, it's just an ordinary Wednesday as far as he's concerned. And all the rest of us, what is it? The wind is blowing, and our eyeballs are scorched. Not an Arab. Well, and so it is with the residents of northern Indiana, which get the full blast of that wind howling down the lake and around Chicago. This is why they call it the Windy City, The lake and its juxtaposition with the prairies produces a turbulence. I don't want to go into the meteorological problems here. That means a lot of wind. And it howls and whistles in and out of the Randolph Street station like a banshee gone out of its skull. Well, on good cold winter nights, which generally do not occur in the Midwest until after the first of the year. They're just warming up now. They're just getting set for the winter. Yeah, that's true. because the lake, you see, because the lake is a lot of water, it does keep it a little warm out there for a while in the fall. But then when the lake cools off, it cools off with a vengeance like the freezing compartment of a hot point refrigerator. It really cools off, Dad. You can see ice in that lake. Well, walking along by the mill, for example, when I worked in the steel mill, which was built right on the lake. The steel mills are sticking out in the lake. All steel mills are sticking out into the lake because they use the lake for ore shipments, the boats that come down from the Mesabi Iron Range and from way up north that bring in the coal and all so forth, and of course ship out the stuff too after they make it. It is necessary to have water for a steel mill. Well, in January and February, the ice flows on Lake Michigan extend as far as your eye can see. They go maybe 8 or 9 miles. There's a big ice breakup. The lake is totally frozen over during the winter. Not frozen over, but it is impassable for shipping. Are you aware of that? That they have the big spring breakup? Well, I have seen ice flows in Lake Michigan in April. Ice flows that were like 9 stories high and about 17 miles across. Well, that means you've got a pretty brisk April, when the wind is blowing off an ice flow that extends all the way up to Sault Ste. Marie and blows it right down your ear, right into the windows in the bedroom. You've got a pretty cold April, I'll tell you. And of course, likewise, in the middle of January and February, it's fantastic. Well, I'll tell you one night. I remember this night because it was so vivid. The really big nights make it with a kid. And I was, I can tell you exactly. I was in 6th grade. I was in 6th grade, exactly. How old was a kid in 6th grade? Because I can tell you who it was. It was Miss Smith. He's what, 10? 10, okay. Well, all right, I'm 10 years old, see, and I'm in 6th grade. And I come home from school. My kid brother comes home from school, and we went to different schools then. And he went down to the school that's about 4 blocks away, and I went to the one that was about 1.5 miles away, you see. This is in Indiana. And so it is now about 6 o'clock. The temperature is roughly 30 or so, which is a very warm day in the middle of winter in Chicago, in that area. And everybody's out, and throwing little snowballs around. Because they always have snow. That's another thing. Snow lands on the ground in the Midwest, I'd say roughly about October. Let's say they get their first snowfall. The original snowflakes are still there in June. The original ones. They just move them around, that's right. They move them off to one side a little bit, but they're still there. I've seen streets, main streets, covered with snow and successive short freezes and thaws and snow and thaw and snow, to where the street is 2 or 3 feet higher than it is normally. And it is a paved street, paved with ice. They can't get it off. Literally cannot remove it, and so people just drive on the ice. The street then is coated with a coating of ashes and stuff, and you think that's the street. Well, finally, when springtime comes, the whole street sinks 2.5 feet. It just goes right down. You find shoes, you find old footballs, you find a couple of lost natives, and they'll find a native that's been lost ever since September. They'll find him in a drift. That's the end of it. When it thaws. Well, speaking of lost, this is WOR AM with FM New York here. But I don't know, I suppose I'm boring the daylights out of you, because nothing is worse than rotten weather stories. But I'm going to tell you what happened on this night. And I'm not exaggerating it. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. It was about 30 degrees, and it gets immediately dark out there. At this time of the year, there is hardly any twilight. It's either light or it's immediately dark. And most of the days in the Midwest, in the middle of winter, and because of the way it is, because of a lot of other things, the weather conditions out there, it's extremely dark. It is very gray a good part of the time. I can remember in schools when it's so dark that they have to have all the lights on, and it's just like night almost in the middle of the afternoon in a good, really cold winter day. It's gray. Stygian gray. It's almost black. Well, you get home, it's about 30, maybe 25, something like that, just a little bit below freezing. And it's about 4 o'clock, about the time the kids come home, and it's already pretty dark and the lights are on. So I go to the store. My mother says, go to the store. Well, I start out to go to the store, which was about 1.5 blocks away. Now remember, there was already snow, which had been on there, on the ground, off and on, for maybe a month and a half, just snow and rubble and ice and stuff. And so I'm running along and I'm sliding in the snow and everything. And about halfway to Mattingly's store, I feel this. It just starts out like that. There's a big puff of absolutely blood-chilling, ice-cold wind. It's like opening up an enormous deep freeze with a fan attached. Just one puff. Well, I took off from Mattingly's store knowing exactly what is about to occur. It has come from the direction of the lake, which was about 1.5 miles away. I get in Mattingly's store, and I'm buying whatever the stuff is that says on the note. And they're loading it up, the hamburger and the salami, and I'm getting the sauerkraut and the red cabbage and stuff, and the oleo and everything, and I'm buying all the big stuff we're going to have. And I'm loading it up, and I got my bag, and I walk out of Mattingly's store. And it is now about 10 or 15 degrees colder than when I started out, and it is roughly about 50% darker. It gets dark almost instantly when the big cold comes down from the north woods. You see, the north woods we can practically see from the front porch. Most people who live in New York have never seen the northern lights. Well, the northern lights are a very common sight in backyards in the Midwest. And already it's starting to come. Along with the wind, these tiny pellets of this hard Arctic snow. Now, the snow that I'm referring to is a different kind of snow than the kind of snow we get, these big, soft flakes that come flying down. These are like tiny ice BBs. They're little BBs. They're like sand. It's very fine and very hard and gritty. And it blows your face and burns your face and scours you like you're being scoured by some kind of fantastic frozen sandpaper. Well, I'm trudging home now against the wind. And the wind is picking up. The temperature is dropping maybe 1 degree or 2 every 5 minutes. It really does drop about every 5 minutes, 1 degree or 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. It goes down so fast. Well, I'm about halfway home. My nose is running. My eyes are watering. My mitten is lost. My mitten is gone. You know, you get a frozen mitten and it's gone, and I'm crying and yelling and hollering, and the wind is howling, and I see about 9 other kids all around. You know, Watts is struggling against the wind, and there's all the kids are coming home from the store, which was the big scene. You know, they go to the store, and you can see kids dotting the horizon. They're like lost camels in a fantastic desert. And the wind in the house looks like it's 1,000,000 miles away. You can see a light, you know. Hey, whoo, and you're struggling, and the cars are going past, and every car that goes past, when it's really getting cold, you can tell, it leaves a trail of exhaust about maybe 30 or 40 feet behind it of condensation. That's really getting cold now. And I knew it was cold. Already now, it must have been about 0. In the half hour that I'd been on the way to the store, it is now down to maybe 0. And going down like a rock, plummeting. You know, wind is picking up, and the wind is howling maybe 45, 50 miles an hour, not in gusts, but in a steady icicle stream. It's like it's made of 1,000,000 ice picks. Oh, woe is me. And the wires, we have these big wires above us, you know, the telephone wires are screaming. You see, all the wires here in New York are pretty well hidden, you know. Well, in towns in the Midwest, the wires are above ground, you know. They have these telephone poles, and you can hear those wires screaming like the rigging of a clipper ship. Believe me, heading into the Cameroons, the wires are whistling, and I finally get up on the front porch, and it is just insane. The house is already... immediately what happens is all the storm windows freeze up completely. You can't even see in the house. And those storm windows freeze up so hard and so fast that even the light does not show through the ice. The ice is just a thick white coat of a kind of snow. It's like the kind of stuff that you got inside the freezing compartment of your refrigerator. And then bang up, I'm cold! Ah! Open goes the door, and I topple into the living room, a solid block of ice, my galoshes clanking and my ears falling off, yelling and hollering, and the oleo is frozen solid, And believe me, the meat is, I had a hamburger, and the meat is frozen. Have you ever carried home frozen hamburger, you know? It started out dripping in red, and it's frozen. Well, I get in the house, and I'm yelling, ah! And my mother immediately takes off my sheepskin, which clanks and bangs, and I was wearing my helmet, you know, the leatherette helmet with the sheepskin inside. Well, it's the first time I have ever seen my goggles. You know, I had these goggles, these celluloid goggles on the top. Well, the celluloid goggles were frozen over like windshields of cars. And there, I mean, you know, she drags me in, and there I'm standing there. I don't know, I must have had about 9 times, really, I must have, now that I think back on it, because I hurt for about a week after it, I must have had at least 5 different places that were badly frostbitten. But in those days, you were just cold. They didn't immediately call the pediatrician or anything like that. They just rushed you into the john and poured hot water on you, or stood you by the radiator. That's all. You know, I stand by the radiator while I'm dripping. You know, I'm beginning to melt. So I'm standing by the radiator, and boy, it is howling out there. The wind is booming in, and just about that time, the old man arrives home, screaming, yelling mad with the Graham Page. He has been caught with half a load of Zerone, and it caught him in mid-flight, and the Graham Page arrives like a gigantic 8-wheel locomotive. There was more steam coming out of that clunker, believe me, that you got out of a roundhouse on a big Saturday night. Shoo! And the water is screaming, and the old man is hollering, "Quick, get the hot water! Oh, for God's sakes, hurry up! They're going to crack the block!" And he's yelling, and in and out of the house he's running, and you could hear the Graham is out there. He's keeping the motor running, but it's in mortal agony. You know, it's a death throes, and the water is screaming, and the old man is running back and forth, and he tears out of the back of the house, and he's bound for Anderson's filling station to get some Zerone, you know. Yelling and hollering, and he falls down the steps on the ice and into a snowdrift, and he's gone. And the old Graham Page is out there, and the wind is howling, and I'm standing by the radiator yelling and screaming because my ears hurt. And my kid brother is hiding under the he's hiding under the kitchen table watching and whimpering. Well, finally, it was wild. The snow started to come down. It then started to snow hell-bent for election. Excuse the expression, but it started to come in. The world was a solid white out there. It was absolutely solid white. You could just see it slanting, and the wind, you know, carries it horizontally to the ground. And it's going in. We can hear the old Graham out. It's hitting on about 3 now. It's pumping the water out through its guts, through the back end, and it's you couldn't see anything. And my mother keeps running back and forth, pouring hot water into it, trying to save it. And she's got on her sheepskin and yelling, "Hurry up! Close the door when I go out! Hurry up!" Ah! Boom! And the door closes. She's carrying out a jug of water. Well, through the snow and the storm, you could see the old man approaching with 5 cans of Zerone. He's going to save the car. I mean, that's the first thing that these nuts out there think of, you know. So he comes plodding in through the driveway and up there, and he's pouring the Zerone. Well, the car was already pretty sick, you know. He's pouring the Zerone. Every time he'd pour in the Zerone, it would spit it out. He's pouring it. He's, for crying out, give me a blanket, quick, a blanket. He's putting blankets on. I don't know why they put blankets on cars, but that was a big thing, to put a blanket. So the old man is running and ripping the blankets off the bed. You know, we are the people, the devil with the people. You know, he's going to save the Graham. So he's running out, putting blankets and comforters and everything on the hood. Well, in the meantime, the snow is starting to come down. It is really coming down. Well, my father realized immediately what was about to happen. He puts the car in gear. He didn't care whether she was knocking, roaring, steaming, and drives it right straight into the garage. He just drives it in there. The steam is hissing out, and he turns it off, piles up the blankets on it, runs for the house, and the wind is really coming down. And before he goes, he slams the door as hard as he could on the garage, gets up into the house, and we sit in the kitchen. All of us are sitting. The old man is purple with rage. If there's anything that makes a Midwesterner mad, it's when his car freezes up. You see, because they all, like everybody else, push their luck. Ever since Thanksgiving, he figured he would go in and, all right, see. And all he had was a few drops left from last year. And the way the Graham used everything. This Graham Page used gaskets the way most cars use oil. He was putting a gasket in every 3rd day, you know. It's just a kind of car like that. It burnt everything. So he's sitting there, and of course, nobody can get madder than a guy who's mad at himself for lousing up. And he is really mad. He's sitting at the kitchen table madder than the devil, and every once in a while he gets up and he takes a penny, and this is a Midwestern trick. You take a penny, an ordinary penny, and you hold it on the window, the frozen window, and the penny will melt a tiny round spot. It'll make a clear peephole in a frozen-up window so you can look out. So he's got these 2 penny holes for his eyes, and he's looking out at the garage. He says, "That damn thing!" And he's looking out. Whoo, the wind is drifting it up. And by now, it's been maybe a half an hour, and my mother is serving the hamburgers. The garage is already drifted up to the eaves. It is that quick. This stuff is coming down in screaming, maniacal bushel basketfuls from up in the North Woods somewhere, and it is bringing large chunks of the lake in with it. And it is now up to the eaves in these great... Well, the garage looked like a pyramid. It just went up like that, no sides, just drifted up. And it continues and continues, and the wind is screaming and howling now, and the snow is coming down. And we are now looking out of the front window. I'm going to describe a sight that is emblazoned in my mind. When you talk about great winter nights, about a block and a half from our house, there were streetcar wires. The streetcars went past there. They had an interurban electric... The North Shore, as a matter of fact, is what it was. In the South Shore, they had these big interurban trains that still run in Chicago. And they're electric trains. Well, about a block from our house, these wires were becoming covered with this fantastic coating of frozen ice and snow. Have you ever seen pictures of ship rigging? When a ship has come in from the North Sea? Well, these wires were covered, and they were breaking. And every time one would break, there would be a tremendous explosion. It would just light up the whole sky like an enormous fireworks display. It would go, and this great arc. And the wire, of course, would fall down in the snow and would just explode when it hits the snow, because this is very, very high amperage voltage that is laying around there. And, of course, everything is stopped now. And these wires keep breaking, and about a half a mile from our home, across the big prairie, was a series of high-tension wires that carried 30,000 volts over to the refineries. Well, now, these are the big towers, the great big steel towers. You see them over in Jersey over there. Well, these towers, Dad, started to go down. They were going down in the combined rush of wind, ice, and snow that had hit. It was now about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. Nobody's asleep. The wind is piling up that snow. And looking out of the front window of our house, we had a terrace. And we had a big front porch, and the steps went down. There were about 7 or 8 steps down to the lawn. And then the lawn went down, and then there was another 6 or 7 steps down to the street level. It was one of those terrace things. Now our porch is just level with the street. That is covered, Dad, all the way to Stryker's house across on the other side. Stryker's house was right up to the windows on the first floor by now. And it is in great peak drifts, just reaching straight up and down like an enormous white sea. And that wind is screaming, and it's laying horizontally. The snow is coming in great rolling gusts. Have you ever seen tumbleweeds? Well, one of the surprising sights in a real snowstorm is what they call rolling snow. Rolling snow is, I suppose, the equivalent of rolling snow is spume in the ocean. Spume. Have you ever seen the wind whip up the water so much that the water looks like it's smoke? It goes, it rolls over the ocean. Well, you see great rolling waves of snow, just literally rolling, just. And it's not really drift snow. This is the way the snow, it's like snow that is coming down at an angle and then hitting the ground and then bouncing up and going on until it gathers a kind of puff of smoke. It's like waves of snow rolling along over the ground. Oh, boy, it's an insane sight when you get a 50 and a 60 mile an hour wind howling along. Well, at about that time, I would say it was about 9 o'clock. And the big towers, we saw 2 big towers go down with a fantastic roar, gigantic explosion. And someplace, they cut the electricity. They had to cut it all. And all the lights went out in the entire town, just like that. Boom. Dead silence. Except for that wind. And immediately, you know that in the Midwest, everybody has a drawer down in the cupboards in the kitchen, a drawer that's got all that stuff. And among all the stuff, among the string, they always have about 9 emergency candles for exactly this, these white candles that they buy. So immediately, my mother is running for the candles. The wind is screaming over that wild ground, just screaming. And it is pitch black. You cannot see a light now, of course, for miles around. And then gradually you begin to see the candle, just a little tiny candle. And you see people peeking out of these tiny penny holes, once in a while. And you see then, and this is probably the most spectacular sight, you see where guys have abandoned cars. And as far as you can see along the roads, and this is not a wild country town. As far as you can see along the streets and the roads, you just see these little tiny hills that are barely discernible, just a little bump, and you know it is a car that somebody has abandoned. If he was lucky, there were at least a half dozen people caught in cars, by the way, who had to be rescued maybe 2 days later, actually stuck could not get out. They couldn't open the doors or anything. It was frozen. Their cars were frozen stiff. They said, we'll pull over to the side of the road, and by the time they pulled over to the side of the road and rested for 10 minutes, the car was covered up. That's the kind of snowstorm it was. Well, by now, the ground is just like, it's level, and you can just see the roofs of houses as far as you can see, and it is now covering our porch and is right up to the windows and drifting down sort of great rolling drifts. Our driveway, which was between our house and Bruner's house, which had been like a chasm, an actual chasm, between the two houses, and it was down below the level of the lawn. It was one of those down with the little concrete abutment, It was disappeared completely. The snow in the driveway must have been 10 feet deep, at least, in the driveway, because that was like shoot, it caught it all. Well, we're sitting there, and the wind is screaming in. And by that time, we're getting ready to. Kids are starting to cork off, and once in a while you'd hear the dull thud of a telephone pole going down out there. Yeah, everything went off. As a matter of fact, the radio completely conked out. There were 4 or 5 antennae blown down. The big antenna, WGN, a couple of others, just absolutely, that was it. They just went off the air. They were blown off the air. They lost their current, everything. It was a fantastic blizzard. Well, by about 10 or 11 o'clock, the temperature stood at roughly 25 below zero. It had dropped from about 25 or 30 degrees at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon until now. Just a few hours later, it had dropped about 50 degrees. That is a drop. And with that wind and with that strange buckshot snow, you really had yourself a gas. Well, of course, we're trying to go to bed. Well, by that time, there is a new complication. I don't know whether you've ever lived in a house where all the pipes are frozen. Well, that complicates a lot of things. We don't even have to go into that. Everything was frozen in the house. And then the final kicker, the final irony, the wind was coming in and icing up so much that in some nutty way it was icing up everybody's chimneys. We had chimneys, sticking up, and it was icing it up. It was doing something, and blowing, the wind was coming down into the furnaces. And so the old man suddenly gets panicky at about 10 o'clock because coming out of the hot air registers is great yellow puffs of coke smoke. Oh, he's running down in the basement. Hey, it's done. Hey, boom, boom, boom. He's hollering. He can't figure it out. His first reaction when the furnace did anything was to grab the big handle on the side and shake it and start hitting it with the poker. That was his first reaction. Well, the more he shook it, the more the smoke is coming out, and we're up in the front room, and the smoke is coming out and puffing around. You can't open the windows, and the old man has said, "What am I going? Hey, for crying! What? Will you work the damper? It's the damper. Get the damper." Well, we had a thing called the damper, which was behind the kitchen door. It was a kind of a thing, you'd move it. It said damper on it or something. You ever hear of such a thing? Well, we're working the damper. He figured it was the damper then. So my mother's up there working the damper, and with that, a giant puff of smoke comes out of the chimney and out of the furnace and out of all hot air registers, and it's even worse. And the old man says, "Will you quit fooling with the damper? For crying out loud!" Boom, boom. and the furnace goes bloop, makes a big belch, bloop, and it kind of blows up. Have you ever seen a furnace blow up? It went bloop. And the old man is screaming and yelling down in the basement, and the only thing he can figure to do is to put out the fire, which is what he proceeded to do. He got about 4 buckets of water out of the basement clothes. We had these big clothes things down there, and he gets about 4, push! That's it. Whew. He says, I figure it's better to have the fire out and freeze than to get gassed. And there it is. The fire is out. Yellow smoke is hanging in the draperies. It's hanging in the bedroom in the John. And next door you can hear Mrs. Bruner yelling at Mr. Bruner. The same thing has happened. You can hear him yelling and hollering. And Mrs. Bruner then breaks a window and yells over to our house and hollers, is your house warm? Can we come over? Their house is cold. Everybody's house is cold. It's about 30 below zero now. Well, all I can tell you is this. No electricity. The pipes are frozen. The furnace has conked out. You never saw more stuff piled on beds to try to keep warm. Everybody is huddled in the front bedroom with every coat, every piece of junk out of the closets. Guys are wearing tennis shoes on their ears. You know, the whole thing. Everybody is sitting there, and they take the bedclothes off. They got everything piled up. It's like that. Everybody's piled under a great big pile of stuff. It's like moles, and the wind is screaming and hollering out there all night long. And all I remember as a kid finally falling asleep under 17, maybe 18 pounds of daybed stuff, you know, with big cretonne curtains, and everything was piled up. The rug was on top of us. And finally, my mother had a great gambit. She would take all the papers, our newspapers, and put them inside. You know, you put them inside of your pajamas. You ever seen that trick? She would line us with newspapers. So, yeah, I mean, sure, it works great. So lined up with newspapers, you put your bathrobe on, you put your football suit on, you put your baseball suit on, you put your pongee long johns on, you put your helmet on, you put everything on, you put your sheepskin on, you put the whole scene. I had everything on, and then finally I'm asleep there in the comforters. That's all I remember. Well, the next morning, there it is. The wind has stopped, and the sun is out as brilliantly as it's ever shone. In fact, this is what generally happens out there after a blizzard. That sun comes out. Well, of course, immediately the kids are out looking out at the world, you see, and it's about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I do not know how to describe to you the feeling of an Indiana house at 5 o'clock in the morning after the furnace has been out for 8 or 9 or 10 hours, and the wind has been blowing down the eaves. The wind has been blowing in every possible crack and crevice. Even the mice were huddled around us, just hanging on to us for protection. It is so fantastic. And immediately, the only thing that worked was the gas oven. And so my mother is out there with the gas oven going, and the entire family is standing around the oven, and we're just standing there with the heat going like mad. And what do you think we're doing? Well, I'll tell you what we're doing. There was not even the slightest thought of not going to school. No. I mean, you go to school, you know, that's it. And here I was about, well, you know, a kid of, what is it, 10? I was about 3 feet 7, and my kid brother was about 2 feet 6, and so so we put on our long black stockings, about 4 pairs of them. We put on 2 pairs of long johns. I put on 4 sweaters, 3 pairs of corduroy pants, including the one that had the twigs growing out of it. I put on my woolen socks that I used in gym. I put on my tennis shoes. I put on over them my galoshes. And over them, I put on another pair of woolen socks. I put on my earmuffs, my leather helmet. I put on my sheepskin coat. I must have weighed at least 250 pounds. And for a 56-pound kid, that's a lot, you know? And so at that point, I am propelled. I go out the front door, followed by my kid brother. Well, all I can say is that I burrowed all the way to I literally burrowed. I'm telling you the truth. There was no question about it. All the kids are just burrowing their way like worms through gigantic walls of ice. And it's funny how people were. They never thought in terms of the kids freezing on their way to school and they forget it. We'll never see you again. They just went. And there's that brilliant sunshine out there. It's about 7:30. The kids got to be to school by 8. And I am down in the snow burrowing. My kid brother is burrowing to the left, and I am burrowing to the right. And all around me, in the great walls of ice, I could hear other kids, maybe 40 or 50 feet away, burrowing. Just burrowing. You could hear ice chipping and kids sniffing and crying, but burrowing their way towards the geography class. Burrowing and chopping. Well, it must have been like 11:30 or 12 o'clock, or maybe even 1 o'clock by the time I finally arrived at school. I got at school, and there must have been maybe 100 kids out of maybe 700 or 800 kids that were supposed to be there. There were 100 kids would arrive, but it was not that these kids were not coming. Everyone knew they were on their way. They were burrowing their way. So I'm sitting in the class there. Miss Smith, who was a 6th grade teacher, she says, well, I guess we might as well send you kids home. The kids, okay. They get up. They put on everything that they have just taken off. They go out and start burrowing home. That was all there was to it. You burrowed home. Well, as far as you could see was this gigantic snow. Everything stopped completely. The wires were down. The streetcars stopped running. The great big high tension poles were just laying over like enormous old melted icicles. And we got back. It was a big deal. The kids really dug it. So we got back home, and we climbed up on the porch. It's now about 3:30. It's getting dark. And that's it. That was the giant snowstorm. That snow, we did not get our car out of the garage for roughly 3 weeks. I'd say anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks. And don't think for 1 minute that the old man wasn't glad. It was the only time he could get away from that rotten Graham Page and do it legally. And by the way, it was my old man's. He used that as an excuse the following spring to get another rotten car. He says, that Graham is shot after the big snow. What am I going to do? Every big snow, he always used it as a cop-out so he could get rid of the latest turkey that he bought. I'll never forget the Hupmobile with the rubber transmission. You don't want to hear about that. But this snow was there, and it laid there. I would say, probably that snow laid on the ground, and the concomitant disaster and confusion. That was not considered a disaster, though. It was just considered a bigger storm than usual. Nobody said much about it. There was not a lot of writing about it, but that started a cycle. And if any of you are interested in history of meteorological events in America, that is one of the longest cold cycles that ever hit the Midwest, that area. As a matter of fact, there was something like 6 weeks where the temperature did not rise above 0 one day. And it hovered roughly in the average vicinity of some 15 below all the time, 24 hours a day. And it got to the point where if the temperature got up to 0, that was like great, You take off your sweaters and start running around and hitting tennis balls and stuff around. Oh, really? That's true. And all along the fronts of the houses were icicles that just like great sheets just lay right down all the way to the ground. Great, fat, flat sheets just laying down there. Just hanging down, and the light is so beautiful. The light is cannot even really be described. The light, a combined light of snow coming through icicles, covering windows, gives a peculiar stained glass quality to even the rottenest house. And there were these enormous icicles that hung down outside of our kitchen window. And my mother is looking through the geraniums in her orange chenille bathrobe and looking at just a great big wall of icicle. And she'd keep looking, and once in a while you'd hear Bruner out there muttering on the other side of his icicles. And it was like, it was a big party. Everybody enjoyed the big storm. They were all there, and they stayed there, and they looked out, and they sang, and they hollered, had fist fights. By the way, the population had a tremendous zoom about 8 or 9 months later. But storms do many things.
Well, that's it for Airchecks this week. We will have more Gene Shepard next week. I can't always tell how long each episode is going to be, but we keep on doing this until we hit the last episode in 1977. Airchecks is normally a 3-hour podcast uploaded weekly and can be heard every Sunday on the K-Tai radio network. See you at the same time and same channel.